Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. Today from Guns for Hire, how the CIA and U.S. Army recruit mercenaries for White Rhodesia. It's a historical reprint of what appears to be a 1979 pamphlet, basically. This is from the introduction. It does have an ISBN number. It is available in book sources. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, actually this must have been published post-1980 because they're referencing Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, 270,000 white settlers, mostly immigrated since World War II, controlled the government and economy, ruling over the 7 million black Africans. The Zimbabweans cannot vote. They have been forced off the bulk of the arable land, and they have no democratic rights whatsoever. All labor performance in Zimbabwe is black labor, and it is intensely exploited, often at less than subsistence wages. Zimbabweans have been fighting European invaders since the early 17th century. Since the 1890s, they have been directly ruled by Europeans, at first in the form of a private British corporation, the British South Africa Company. Since 1923, direct political rule has been in the hands of the white settlers, currently led by Ian Smith and his fascist Rhodesian Front Party. It's important to note that the white settlers were originally given this direct local power as a, quote, self-governing colony of the British government, thereby creating a master-caretaker relationship. During these past 80-odd years, Western imperialism, the multinational corporations of the United States, Britain, and South Africa, has extracted huge profits from the exploited and oppressed Zimbabwean population via the subsidiaries of the Anglo-Americans, Lonrho, AMAX, Union Carbide, Mobil, ITT, and other corporations. They fully intend to continue doing so as long as they can. The white settler minority has been rewarded for their violent subjugation of the Zimbabwean people with perhaps the highest national standard of living in the world. Sir Roy Welensky, the former Prime Minister of the Central African Federation, which included what is now Rhodesia, once said, "This man Smith has an appeal. It's the appeal of an easy life. For $6,000 a year, you can have 5 servants, a swimming pool, and a lot." Beginning during the early 1960s, however, the Zimbabwean nationalist forces under the leadership of the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, evolved the strategy of guerrilla war to liberate their people and land. It is proving to be very successful. There are 20,000 guerrillas in base camps in Tanzania and Mozambique, over 3,000 in Zimbabwe itself, and this number is continually rising. In a meeting between Stephen Solars, a U.S. congressman, and the ZANU guerrilla leaders, they were reported to reject the possibility of enlisting the assistance of Cuban or other foreign troops, declaring that if we cannot liberate ourselves, we do not deserve to be liberated. Despite Western propaganda to the effect that the U.S. and British only wish to avoid a bloodshed in Rhodesia, don't forget the Zimbabweans have been bleeding for almost a century, their real fear is that the liberation struggle will win. With this victory in sight, it is not surprising that the counterattack by the Smith regime has become more vicious and brutal. Actually, this must have been published pre-1980 because this is when Smith was still in power in Rhodesia. More than 250,000 rural Zimbabweans have been forced into concentration camps. Terrorist raids have been conducted against Zimbabwean refugees in Mozambique. Dusk to dawn shoot-on-sight curfews have been instituted and enforced in the border areas. And escalating counterinsurgency attacks have been launched against the military arm of the liberation struggle, the Zimbabwean People's Army, ZIPA. It is crucial for Westerners to understand that the Smith regime has not stood alone in this barbaric campaign. This pamphlet documents the critically important element in U.S. imperialism's support for the Smith regime, white mercenary reinforcements for the fascist Rhodesian, quote, security forces. This flow of U.S. mercenaries to prop up white Rhodesia is an important, though secret, part of U.S. imperialism's strategy for Africa. The U.S. has massive investments in southern Africa. Zimbabwe alone supplies the bulk of high-grade chrome ore used in the U.S. for jet engines and other advanced technological items. Coal, copper, and other minerals are ripped out of Zimbabwe for U.S. industry. Mobil Oil, Texaco, Hertz Rent-A-Cars, Holiday Inns, and many other U.S. corporations operate illegally in Rhodesia through foreign subsidiaries. More important still is South Africa, the fortress of U.S. interests in Africa, where $1.5 billion is invested by GM, IBM, Ford, and other giant multinational corporations. The liberation of Zimbabwe would, for the first time, penetrate the buffer zone of satellite countries protecting the borders of South Africa. South African guerrilla fighters, who are already training by the thousands in camps in Tanzania and Zambia, would have direct access to re-enter their land and accelerate the liberation struggle. Knowing that the stakes are high, U.S. imperialism has worked to strengthen the white supremacist outposts in Africa, although at times this had to be done covertly. In 1970, the Nixon White House approved Henry Kissinger's Operation Tar Baby strategy, based on Option 2 of the Secret National Security Study Memorandum Number 39. This strategy essentially called for covert military assistance, including direct exchanges, so the South African troops could be trained in the U.S. in specialized tactics and weapons. This would be done while the U.S. tried to convince Africans that it was on their side. This is from the pamphlet number 39, that Kissinger memorandum. We would maintain public opposition to racial oppression, but relax political isolation and economic restrictions without openly taking a position undermining the United Kingdom and the UN on Rhodesia. We would be more flexible in our attitudes toward the Smith regime. And it goes on from there. Guns for hire.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Wow. Well, the knives are out. Tonight is the debate. And, I don't know if this is the main narrative of this thing is that Bernie Sanders' campaign had a script where if somebody brought up Elizabeth Warren when you're talking to them on the telephone, there's a telephone script, you should say things like, well, yeah, she does well with, well-educated white people. She's apparently bringing some of them into the party, which is kind of a slap. It's basically saying she's an elitist. And so, the Warren campaign said, hey, let's stop that. Don't do that. And I don't know if the Bernie campaign stopped it or not. I've seen conflicting reports in the media. But then, apparently Elizabeth Warren leaked, or her campaign leaked. I'm guessing this has more to do with campaign managers than the candidates themselves. But who knows? Leaked that in a meeting 2 years ago when Bernie and Elizabeth got together and talked about getting into this race, Bernie had pointed out that Trump was able to weaponize anything. Look at what he did to all those Republicans. And that Trump would be weaponizing gender against any woman who ran. And according to Elizabeth Warren, he said he didn't think, therefore, that a woman could beat Trump. And, she came out and reaffirmed that either late yesterday or this morning. And said she disagrees. She thinks that a woman can beat Trump. I think a woman can beat Trump too. But frankly, this is getting so much play, particularly on CNN. I watched CNN for about an hour this morning while I was marking up the show. And it really surprised me. I guess it shouldn't have surprised me. The debate is going to be on CNN tonight. So, of course, they want to get as many eyeballs as possible. So, anyhow, that's going on. But there's another debate that essentially is happening, and that is about the policies that both Senator Sanders and Senator Warren are proposing. And I saw a piece on this on MSNBC, I believe it was on Morning Joe, and then I saw a guest, two guests, in fact, on CNN this morning talking about this. And in both cases, what they were saying was essentially, oh my God, Bernie and Elizabeth Warren want to spend more money. The guy on CNN said, they want to double the size of the federal government. Well, it depends on how you define size, all right? Employees, money spent, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, not double, that's hyperbole. But the simple reality is that right now in the United States, federal spending is about a third of GDP. It's 35% of GDP. So you get the entire size of the economy, about a third of that is federal spending. And of course, a big chunk of that is the Pentagon. But a big chunk of that is also Medicare and Social Security, which is, why the banksters in New York want it privatized so badly. But if you look at the European Union, and this is the entire EU, right? All 20 high, 30 low, roughly 30 countries in the European Union. I'm sorry, I don't have that number right off the top of my head, but bottom line, a number of those countries, like Turkey, do not invest heavily in their public sector. And other countries like Denmark invest very heavily in their public sector. So this is an average across the EU. And it's 46%, or nearly half. 46% of GDP is government spending. Now, what accounts for the difference? Yes, about half of all spending in Denmark, probably a little more than half, is government spending. So what accounts for that? Well, people never get a medical bill. Last year in the United States, 634,000 people filed for bankruptcy because somebody got sick. About half of all bankruptcies in this country. We have, and it's not always just a physical illness. There's also mental illness. There's also, crises that have to do with people's teeth or their vision, which are generally not covered by our insurance policies or Medicare or Medicaid here in the United States. Those are all covered in most of the European countries. So basically, people don't live in fear of getting sick. Is that worth having your government be a little larger? Assuming that you think that that's some kind of an evil to begin with. I'm not buying that because, frankly, quality of life in Denmark or Germany or, pick your country, quality of life is better than here. The work hours are shorter or fewer than here. The standard of living is higher than here. They don't have deep levels of poverty. You don't see homelessness. You don't see people declaring bankruptcy. I mean, 634,000 people declared bankruptcy in the United States because somebody got sick. How many declared bankruptcy in Denmark? 0. Germany, 0. France, 0. I mean, pick your European country, 0. So that's health care. Then also in all those countries, in Denmark, for example, you get paid according to an email that I got from somebody who's apparently Danish. You get paid $900 a month to go to school, plus your tuition is free. But they pay for books and for the cost of living and everything. Right? We could do that here. It would just mean that government spending would be a larger share of GDP. And it's going to be real interesting to see how this plays out tonight, because basically on that stage tonight, and this is the biggest difference between the two sides. You have on one side Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, who are saying, yes, government spending should go up dramatically to pay for college for everybody and to pay for health care for everybody. And then you've got a few other people on that stage, Amy Klobuchar, Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, and Tom Steyer, who are all saying, no, government spending should not go up dramatically. We can figure out how to muddle through and reduce the number of people who commit suicide in the United States because, economically they're shattered because somebody got sick, and reduce the number of people who have to declare bankruptcy from 600,000 down to maybe 300,000. But these, and the wealth tax, we now see, 57% of Americans are in favor of a wealth tax, which is how Bernie and Warren, Liz Warren, want to pay for this in large part, rather than taking it out of your pocket. Take it out of the pocket of Tom Steyer. It'll be interesting to see what he has to say about this, too. But, and the other thing in Europe they have, or in Denmark anyway, 2 years of unemployment insurance. The Republicans, we used to have 2 years of unemployment insurance. The Republicans did away with it during the Bush administration. They cut it down to a year. Trump has cut it down to 6 months. Federally supported long-term unemployment insurance. So you don't lose your home in most European countries if you lose your job. And you have, in the United States right now, this epidemic of what are called the diseases of despair. These numbers, over the last 3 years, these numbers have all gone up, not down. Deaths from suicide, deaths from alcoholism, deaths from drug abuse, and deaths from gunshot. They've all gone up in the 3 years since Trump has been in office, as our society gets more brutal and more rough and more, whatever you want to call it. So, what are you expecting tonight, and how do you think this is going to play out? And do you think that most Americans actually would like to see the United States become more like Germany or Sweden or France? Or do you think most Americans are really and truly terrified of that? That they just, oh my God, we can't have that. Really? Having government, half of spending is government spending? But life is good. See, government is the way that we take care of each other. That's the whole point of it, right? Government is simply an institutionalized version, essentially, of family. Shouldn't we be taking care of each other? We'll be back at 16 minutes past the hour. I got to tell you about Soleimani, too.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Trump just put out an insane tweet, which is very consequential, and I will share my thoughts on that with you right after this. And welcome back. And Chris in Greenville, South Carolina. Hey, Chris, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hey, Tom, thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Get your mouth a little closer to the microphone, Chris. What's up?
I'm sorry, my phone's kind of broken, so I had to put you on speaker so I can hear you. So,
I am
on
listening.
the issue of healthcare, you say that healthcare is a right, correct?
I'm saying that healthcare is a right. The UN says that healthcare is a right, too.
Okay. And
and every other developed country in the world says that healthcare is a right. Most of them have written it into their constitutions, yes.
Okay. Well, we all want the same thing. Like, I think everyone's in favor of making healthcare more affordable for, like, everyone. But the question is how we get there. And I think the real question we have to ask ourselves is, does declaring healthcare right incentivize give people incentive to. I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous. I've never done this before. So, the real question is, does the clean or right give people incentive to work in the healthcare profession?
I don't see where it would or would not. It's, people don't necessarily go into particular jobs or job functions, out of a sense of duty or morality. I know there are obviously exceptions to that. Joining the military, particularly during time of war, that, is a popular war, is different from that. But, in government service, some people, view this as serving your fellow man and as a noble thing. But, basically, generally speaking, people choose professions because it's something that they would enjoy and it's something that they can make a living at. So I don't, declaring healthcare as a right. If the United States was to join all the other countries in the world and say healthcare is a right, all that means is that now it becomes an obligation of government to protect that right. It doesn't mean that people have to go into the healthcare field or work in healthcare. So that's that. Chris, thanks for the call. Jennifer in Stillwater, Minnesota. Hey, Jennifer, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about tonight's debate quickly. I think that this stuff is being ginned up between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie by certain neoliberal, corporate types because they want to continue that narrative that women don't support Bernie, and it's kind of just a continuing narrative of the Hillary Bernie war. Now it's Elizabeth Bernie, and women, Bernie's against women, and Bernie doesn't want women, and Bernie bros and all this, and of course David Brock invented the term Bernie bros for Obama bros. That's where that came from. Anyone could Google that.
I'd forgotten that. That's right. It was it was to trash Barack Obama when Hillary was running against him in the primary.
Yep, they were called Obama brothers. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, it drives me crazy because I feel like I've been disappeared as a woman. Like, only Bernie bros support Bernie, and, women have to support, a woman and all this. I mean, it's crazy. Sure. I know literally thousands of women who support Bernie, and, we're not bros.
Yeah, I mean, look at his rallies. It looks 50-50 to me. Jennifer, thanks a lot for the call. It is spot on and point made. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Okay, so as important as the future of healthcare and the future of education and the future of our young people and ending homelessness in the United States and diminishing poverty, as important as all those things are, war and peace are big issues too. And Donald Trump a couple of weeks ago took us right up to the edge of World War III. Scared the bejesus out of lots of us, myself included, or concerned the bejesus out of us. And, by assassinating General Soleimani. At the time he did, in the way that he did, inside Iraq, on the road to the Baghdad airport, at the same time killing the head of an Iraqi Shia militia, which was fighting ISIS. Now, the effect of this were multiple. The effects were multiple. Number one, the country of Iraq said, hey, you just blew up a guy inside our country who was trying to engage in peace negotiations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And we were a party to that, and we don't appreciate it. We'd like you all to leave. So the Iraqi parliament kicks us out of the country. Trump says, you want us to leave? We're going to impose sanctions on you. We're going to starve you. And we're going to prevent you from using a banking account, which is the one way that you can sell your oil. I mean, this is just insane, right? But Trump said that. So, number one, Iraq wants us out. Number two, Iran says, see, the JCPOA, the Iran deal, the Iran nuclear deal, that Trump, quote, pulled us out of? Well, Iran had been honoring it. And Europe had been honoring it up until Soleimani was killed. Now, we were ignoring it, but everybody else was like, okay, we're going to stay with this. And the day after Soleimani is blown up, Iran says, that's it. We're not complying with this anymore. They walked it back a little bit and said that they're not going to kick out the inspectors. So they're still sort of complying with it. But basically, they put us on notice that, if you're going to treat us this way, we're not going to play. And then Trump raised the sanctions on Iran, pushing Iran even closer to economic chaos. And, what do countries in economic chaos do? Very often they go to war. Now, this is all really serious stuff, right? We nearly had a war. Oh, and the third thing that happened is that the efforts of the government of Iraq and of the two Shia militias in Iraq, one affiliated with Iran, the other affiliated with Iraq, the leaders of both of which were killed in this airstrike against Soleimani. They both, all of them said, we're going to stop all our efforts against the Islamic State. So now the Islamic State in Iraq is free to grow again, which they are doing. So Trump made Iraq less safe, made Iran less safe, made the world less safe, made America less safe, pissed off a whole bunch of people about us. And so, Democrats in Congress are like, well, why'd you do that? Why did you engage in a behavior that had all these stupid outcomes? Why would you do that? And Trump says, well, there was an imminent threat. The law says I can assassinate somebody. If any minute now, it's the ticking time bomb thing, right? If any minute now, they're going to blow up something that belongs to the United States. They're going to hurt us. They're going to hit us. Because that was the only legal way he could do this. You don't assassinate a senior figure in a foreign government without a damn good reason. And his being a bad guy isn't a good enough reason. That's a great reason to bring charges against him at The Hague or issue an international arrest warrant or get a bunch of countries together to do. But blow him up? No. Because of all of these negative consequences. ISIS was strengthened by Trump doing this. Al-Qaeda was strengthened by Trump doing this. The United States was weakened by Trump doing this. So, he says, oh, well, it was imminent. And then his little toadies go on TV, Mike Pompeo, oh, yes, it was imminent. And then Trump says, oh, they were going to attack our embassy. So the Democrats said, well, show us some proof. And he said, oh, I don't need to show you any proof. And he goes on TV and he says, they're going to attack 4 embassies. So then the head of the Pentagon, the defense secretary, goes on TV and says, well, no, I didn't see anything that said anything about 4 embassies, no. So Trump's just lying through his teeth here. And now this morning he tweets, the fake news media and their Democrat partners are working hard to determine whether or not the future attack by terrorist Soleimani was imminent or not, and was my team in agreement. The answer to both is a strong yes, but it doesn't really matter because of his horrible past. So Trump now says, well, it doesn't really matter. In other words, what he is saying is that he can go to war, or he can take an action that could put us in the middle of a war anytime he wants, under any circumstances, essentially, as long as that person is a terrible person. This is not how democracies work. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with a little bit more riff and a whole lot of calls. Stick around. Book on the Thom Hartmann Book Report today, or Book Club today, is Cuban Women Confront the Future. It's an interview with Vilma Espin. Vilma Espin was the president of the Federation of Cuban Women since its founding in 1960, and was the chair of the Commission for Social Prevention and president of the Infancy Institute and the International Federation of Democratic Women. And it's a long-form interview, actually, the book. So the first question, what does socialism mean in the lives of a Cuban family, and in particular, Cuban woman? Vilma Espin. For the Cuban family, especially the woman, socialism has meant an enormous improvement to the quality of life and personal development. We should remember that until January 1st, 1959, in our country, hunger, poverty, exploitation, repression, and dependence reigned. The revolution opened up new horizons in the economic, political, and social fields, and amongst its key principles is the defense of equal rights for all human beings. The constant struggle to make ends meet disappeared, and with it the antagonism between people competing for the crumbs that could help them escape the tragic destiny that awaited the majority. Thus the family, the basic cell of society, could develop in a rounded way. Our revolution assured all Cubans the chance to exercise each one of their inalienable rights. Each citizen is assured that food prices are reasonable and that education and medical services are free. The state makes a systemic effort to improve living standards to the extent that it is permitted by the tense battle for development that we wage under blockade and constant imperialist threats. Child care facilities have been created to provide care for the children of tens of thousands of working women from the age of 3 months to 6 years. Services to lighten domestic work have been created. Hundreds of thousands of students have also received free lunch at day school and all their meals at boarding school. Hundreds of thousands of workers also receive their meals at a moderate price in their workplace. More industrial laundries and dry cleaners have been established, and more domestic labor-saving devices are available with preference in acquisition and cheaper prices for workers. Huge resources are dedicated to housing construction in urban and rural zones. We also try to guarantee recreational facilities and spiritual enjoyment to all the population. Of course, the possibilities are exciting, but also what we have achieved to date, considering our limitations, is already vastly superior to what families experienced in the past. Social Security provides an income for those who cannot work. As far as women are concerned, equal rights have certainly changed their position in the family and in society. A woman's participation in social production, because it implies her financial independence, has altered her dependent position in the marriage and allowed a change in her ideas, in the way she looks at life. The laws that govern family relations, such as the Family Code, are based on equality and guarantee the right of members of the family to participate in society, to work, study, and to responsibly educate the children in line with our revolutionary principles. This does not mean that we achieved all that we aspire to. We still have problems of a material nature to resolve, which are directly related to our economic development. There is still the need to eliminate backward ideas that some people hold, men and women, with respect to the role that each person should play within the home, the nature of the socialist family and the relationship between a couple, ideas which work against the full participation of women in the building of a new society. Obviously, the economic security guaranteed by both men and women having access to work, free health care, and education, the obvious satisfaction and confidence in oneself that equal opportunity and the chance to fully develop to the extent of one's talents, intelligence, and aptitude offer to each person, the constant motivation and emotional stability that comes from feeling useful, recognized, and dignified as a human being. Everything that socialism has brought to us undoubtedly fulfills the deepest desires of a family, particularly the woman, who until just a quarter century ago was exploited, oppressed, and marginalized in the family and in society. Question: what is the primary concern in Cuba, work or the human being? What place do women occupy within this concern? Vilma Espin: in Cuba, a country that is building socialism, the highest aim is human happiness, based on respect for the fundamental human rights of each person. That includes full social equality to education, health care, work, and professional training, with the chance to employ all of one's faculties to take an active role in society and to help develop that society, to create the material and spiritual basis for a full, harmonious life, where the highest qualities of both men and women flourish. To reach those aspirations requires work, talent, dedication, and willingness from everybody. It requires constant scientific and technological innovation to assure economic and social development. Thus, each member of our society, along with the right to work and all the benefits brought by the revolution, has acquired the duty to help create the economic basis necessary for such advantages. The building of a new society and the fulfillment of new aspirations could not possibly be achieved except on the basis of work and the willingness of the whole population. And the people work with enthusiasm because work is the means for creating wealth and goods for all to enjoy. Work that is free from exploitation does require a new dimension, a quality that stimulates and produces satisfaction. To feel that you are useful and are creating your destiny, to project yourselves toward the future through your work, to cultivate the future. In a speech in January 1964, Che Guevara said that when each Cuban viewed work as a vital expression of their human creativity, technology, technique, and inventions would proceed apace, and all would participate with an uncontainable force in building the new society. The book, Cuban Women Confront the Future by Vilma Espin.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Oh, this is incredible. Elizabeth Warren and Chris Van Hollen are calling for an inquiry, an actual investigation into what happened at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump was down there planning to attack Soleimani in Iran. And this is from a report from the Daily Beast. In the 5 days prior to launching a strike that killed Iran's most important military leader, Donald Trump roamed the halls of Mar-a-Lago, his private resort in Florida, and started dropping hints to close associates and club goers that something huge was coming. Now, what came out of this apparently was that just before the announcement of the attack, Northrop Grumman's stock their stock price increased by over 5%. Lockheed Martin's stock went up by over 3.5%, and Raytheon, Mark Esper's former employer, went up by 1.5%. Plus, the price of crude oil went up by over 4%. Now, that was the day after the killing, or immediately after the killing. But they're thinking that a bunch of these people at Mar-a-Lago heard from Trump what was going to happen and went out and bought stock in defense contractors. Absolutely amazing. So anyhow, I was talking about, how Trump has basically just screwed the pooch here on this whole thing. I mean, just with regard to our standing in the world, with regard to our safety, with regard to Iraq's safety, with regard to Iraq's territorial integrity. So as a result of this, the House of Representatives voted 224 to 194 to say, no, Trump, you cannot engage in any kind of military activity against Iran unless you get the permission of Congress first. That is not covered by by either the 2002 AUMF, which was, go after who did 9/11, or the 2003 AUMF, which was it's okay to take out Saddam Hussein. You can't do that. And Trump is now saying, as I pointed out, well, it doesn't matter. So now this House bill is going over to the Senate, and Mike Lee is saying that there might be as many as 10 Republicans who will be voting in favor of this thing. I mean, we'll see where this goes. Chris Murphy, again, pointing out Iraq turns against us, kicking out our troops. Iran restarts the nuclear weapons program. Operations against ISIS stop. And for what? Well, because Trump was being impeached and he wanted to have something big and spectacular. Or maybe Jared needed a couple $100 million and, he needed something that would move the stock markets that he could bet on in advance. I mean, we still don't know who made that $1 trillion bet on in the Chicago Exchange. The Wall Street Journal dropped this little gem, 29 paragraphs in. Mr. Trump, after the strike, told associates he was under pressure to deal with General Soleimani from GOP senators he viewed as important supporters in his upcoming impeachment trial in the Senate, associates said. Meanwhile, the other thing that Trump just tweeted is, I stand stronger than anyone in protecting your health care with pre-existing conditions. Right. At the same time that the Trump Justice Department and 20-some Republican secretaries of state and governors are suing at the Supreme Court to eliminate Obamacare and return to the insurance companies the ability to deny you health care if you have a pre-existing condition. They're hiding that. They're hiding the fact that Trump, according to Forbes, keep in mind, Obama in 8 years, Obama spent $96 million on travel. According to Forbes, Trump's golf trips could cost the taxpayers $340 million. But Steve Mnuchin is delaying the reports. No, we're not going to tell you how much it's cost. We'll let you know after the election, don't you know? This three-judge panel in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled last month that the individual mandate was unconstitutional. So, like I said, these states went into the Supreme Court and said, throw the whole damn thing out. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So, anyway, back to you and your thoughts. Teresa in Encino, California. Hey, Teresa, what's on your mind today? Teresa? Okay, Teresa may be a first-time caller, so I'm going to put her on hold. She's on line 7, Lise. Jared in Downington, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, what's up?
Hello, Tom. I want to talk about social democracy and why I believe the economic royalists are never going to allow it to exist in the United States.
Okay.
The closest we've ever came to really having social democracy in this country was under FDR. And there was even talk back then of a coup by the military that Smedley Butler revealed to Congress.
No, I know all that, Jared, but under Lyndon Johnson's presidency, we got Medicare, we got Medicaid, we got expanded unemployment insurance. We got housing benefits. We got food stamps. These are all pieces of democratic socialism. The social safety net was radically expanded in the 1960s.
Well, our economy was radically different. The economic system was radically different. Most of the planet was obliterated because of the world wars.
No, not in the 60s.
Had, unions.
That was 20 years later.
Okay.
This is 20 years after the war. Germany was a powerhouse. I traveled around Europe in the 60s. Well, no, that was the 70s. I'm sorry. Back to you, Jared, anyway.
The point is we had unions that were strong back then. There was a vibrant left wing.
Yep.
That doesn't exist anymore in the United States.
So is your point that you don't think that either Bernie or Elizabeth Warren can ever win the Democratic nomination or can win the White House?
No.
Is that where you're going with this, Jared?
No, I think they could win, but I think they're going to get the Corbyn treatment. I think they're going to get smeared as an anti-Semite. I think they're going to be smeared as a
you're talking about Jeremy Corbyn. You're comparing them to Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, but Jeremy Corbyn, does have kind of a bizarre past. He's a good guy policy-wise, but I don't know. We'll see. Okay, I get it. I get where you're going. Thanks a lot for the call, Mary in Chicago. Hey, Mary, your thoughts?
So I came across a situation, this was a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and to the doubters who don't care for Medicare for all, do the math. So I came across this Greek man who actually was born in Canada. And what he stated was, my taxes might have been higher up there, but I get to keep more of my money.
Right.
Why? Because education, it doesn't cost, to the roof. Daycare doesn't, isn't to the roof.
Right.
Medical assistance is not to the roof. Do the math.
Yeah.
When they do the math and figure it all out, they would be astonished. So all these figures that they say it's going to cost $13 trillion, what makes you think we're not paying that money right now?
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you, Mary.
They lie about that.
Yeah, and if you do simply do the math, or even just look at the math, you'll discover that the United States is spending about twice as much as any other country in the world for healthcare, and we're getting poorer results. It's just very, very straightforward. Mary, thank you. Gary in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hey, Gary, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
Good. You know, you were talking earlier about the differences between the European countries and us as far as social services and education
and the size of government, yes.
Size of government and medical, pre-medical. There's a movie, I'm sure you're aware of it, but I just wanted to plug it, I guess. Michael Moore's Where to Invade Next.
It is brilliant. It's one of the best movies he's ever made, and it was such a disappointment to me that it got virtually no coverage in the media, and therefore it didn't. It wasn't a blockbuster like some of his other ones that were the media was all buzzing about. But if you haven't seen Where to Invade Next, track it down. Yeah.
The way that people are treated with respect and dignity.
Yep.
From top to bottom.
Yep.
They have, just the school lunches are made by chefs.
Right.
Not coming out of some box.
Yep.
It's
all fresh food.
That's incredible, and I just encourage all your listeners and viewers to watch it. It's free on YouTube. You can find it, and it's sensational, and it'll just wake people up.
I completely agree, Gary. I think it's one of the most important movies that's been made in a long, long time. Thank you, Gary, for that. Charles in Jacksonville, Florida. Hey, Charles, what's up?
Good afternoon, Tom. I was listening to you and recently listened to a lot of people speak about free college.
Mm-hmm.
I went to college in 1971, graduated in 75. And as I can recall, I went to school through the New York State University system, and the state and the federal government had a program called Upward Bound. I went to school for free books. I lived in the city of Buffalo, yet in order for me to succeed, they gave me room and board on the university campus.
Wow, that's great.
Anybody that wanted to go and couldn't afford it was able to go. The only problem that happened was in 1972, as I recall, Richard Nixon wanted an anti-ballistic missile system. It took the money to pay for that system that was never built out of the education money. And that stopped that program. I don't know if it was nationwide, but I know in New York State, me and all of my friends went to school.
Yeah.
And graduated.
Yeah.
So nobody can tell me it can't be done, because I know I'm living proof that it already has been done.
There you go. We did this. And by the way, we did this in a big way with the GI Bill after World War II. Nearly 1 million people and maybe more, lots and lots and lots of people coming back from World War II went to college absolutely for free. And what we do know now is that for every dollar that we spent sending a returning GI to college after World War II, we made between $7 and $10 in extra tax revenue during their lifetime that we as a country wouldn't have gotten otherwise, because as college graduates, they earned higher incomes than they would have if they had simply been high school graduates. My dad went to college that way. My wife's dad went to college that way. He became the Assistant Attorney General for the state of Michigan, all because of the GI Bill. So you're absolutely right, Charles. And we did it in the 50s. We did it in the 60s. We did it with programs like Upward Bound, and in the 70s with Pell Grants in the 80s. We can do this. Charles, thanks for the call. Spot on. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's going to be real interesting to see how all this stuff gets dealt with tonight in the debate. Stick around. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Deborah in Denver. Hey, Deborah, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
I'm going to say this. I had to write it down so I don't get tongue-tied because then I forget my thoughts. I'm going to do this really fast. When I called in, my first time ever calling in anywhere, I mentioned that we were voting for Elizabeth Warren and that she has the juice. Well, since then, that has changed. And mainly as of yesterday, to be honest with you, because we were looking at Bernie Sanders, and he has, in fact, been he has been stable and consistent for 4 years, and I just don't believe her. I mean, I looked back, and there's just no way. He's been consistent. He's ran on things consistently. He hasn't wavered where she has. She has flip-flopped. Now, I just want to kind of give my thoughts on the candidates, on what we were looking at as voters, my husband and I, as well as friends and family members. And I noticed that Joe Biden, he said that he would run as a Republican as vice president. He never said that he would run for a second term. And I noticed that people say that he's electable, but he ran for president twice and lost twice. And when I look at his rallies, hardly anybody shows up. And when they do show up, he attacks his voters that don't agree with him instead of winning them over. And I don't think that's presidential. And I want to know, what has he done for black people and Hispanics? Well, if we ask Anita Hill, we know what he did for her, and we know what he did for Social Security and for bankruptcy and student loans and shark lending. While Bernie was getting arrested for marching with Martin Luther King, where was Joe Biden? I just don't see that he's electable. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. If anybody's going to vote for somebody who's establishment, Amy Klobuchar would be the better candidate, whereas the rest of them represent everything that we hate about politicians, like Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg, he is schmoozing billionaires and millionaires, and he's an opportunist. Plus, he was caught in corruption by firing a police chief. And nobody has attacked him on that. He has not done anything. He has no record. Why are people voting for him? He represents everything that we hate about politicians.
Well, I think both Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg are the if Joe falls, they're going to pick up the pieces candidates. They're both running to be the one who if Joe Biden puts his foot in his mouth or commits some big gaffe, which he frankly has done numerous times in the past, they're the ones who can pick up the pieces. Or either one of them could be betting that if they can do a strong enough showing, in the case of Joe Biden, because of his age, his vice presidential candidate, and frankly, all of them right now, Joe, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders, their vice presidential picks are going to be really, really important because they're all in their 70s.
One last thing, before you let me go, I have to say this, okay? Mm-hmm. Just really fast. I checked to see who Joe Biden has inspired, and I haven't seen he inspired anybody. But Bernie Sanders has inspired an entire movement. He inspired AOC, Katie Porter, Ayanna Pressley, Kano. He inspired the entire nation. And I don't see that Joe Biden has inspired anybody. I just don't see it. Yeah. I
get it. Deborah,
Social Security.
You're repeating yourself now. Deborah, thank you. I got it. Let's focus on what we like, not so much what we don't like. We'll be right back. It's 51 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. of America. Well, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, we've been talking about the primary, about Trump, about what's going on with all these other things. Roy in Santa Fe. Hey, Roy, thanks for listening to 1260 AM. What's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I was wondering if you got any explanation as to why there was no attempt by the Americans or the Iraqis to shoot down these missiles that the Iranians delivered to us.
I think the answer is fairly obvious, Roy. The Iranians told the Iraqis several hours before the attempt. They gave them details of what was going to be fired and where it was going to be fired. And obviously, they told them that they were going to go out of their way to try to avoid any casualties. The Iraqis then told us, and so all we had to do was tell our soldiers, just in case one of these missiles goes haywire, get into your bunker, hide out. And the soldiers did, and nobody got hurt. I mean, Iran was not trying to actually hit us or hurt us. They were trying to save face. That was what was going on.
So do you think that Trump actually trumped this thing up? I mean, it's a display of to make him look good?
Oh, I think the whole thing from beginning to end was designed to make him look good. And I think, with the hard right, it does. I mein, hey, he killed somebody. Oh, boy, we want a leader who kills people, especially bad people. To hell with, where that's going to go or what the consequences or anything else will be. But, yeah, I think absolutely that's what happened, Roy. Roy, thanks a lot for the call. David in L.A. Hey, David, what's up?
Yes, good afternoon, Tom. So as a Frenchman living in the United States since 2013, I wanted to make an observation about, the differences with healthcare system. And obviously in France, healthcare is a right. It's been a right since World War II, because, Europe was destroyed and we put humans before markets at the time. And there's something I noticed since I've been following the news here in the United States is that every time I hear about healthcare here, it's called a product. And I think that as long as healthcare is called a product and on the rights, nothing's going to really change. And the other observation is that people think that it will cost insane amount of money healthcare. But I just want to tell people, your listeners here in the United States, that in France we only pay 4% more taxes than in the United States, and we actually do get free health care, and so I think it's really possible,
Yeah. You get free college, too, don't you, in France? You can go to college without ending up badly in debt, David? Oh,
yes.
I think...
Basically, we don't have a college debt. It doesn't exist. The tuitions are very affordable. And, we have this system. Of course, we have a lot of issues like any other countries. No system is perfect.
Right.
But, we don't pay those insane amount of money when it comes to, surgeries and even basic health costs. The price of medicine. It's just, I hear insane numbers here. And, again, it has to do, I guess, with the money, because everything is about money in the United States, unfortunately.
Right. Now, you said that you pay 4% more in taxes in France than we do here. You mean there was an additional 4% of your tax is what covers health care, or that the French tax rate is actually just 4% higher than the U.S.?
Yes. What I meant by that, Tom, is that basically if you combine all the costs, at the end of the year, we only pay 4% more money than what people would pay here in the United States, and we do get free health care.
4% more in taxes.
Yes, in taxes, absolutely.
Amazing.
So when I hear people say, and I have another quick observation. I don't know if we have time.
Yeah, we don't have time. I'm sorry. We're hitting the end of the hour. But call again, David. Great to hear from you. Thank you so much. We'll be back. We're hitting the top of the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms and our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until at last we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits in that secret a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest healthcare program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single-payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people, and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18, and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe. The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Nuclear power station on Earth. Midnight in Chernobyl.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So the Associated Press was reporting this morning that last year's deficit, the amount of, how far in the red the federal government is for the year, was a little less than $1 trillion, and that this year will probably be a little more than $1 trillion. We don't have the absolute final numbers yet, but if that's the case, get ready. Right? What we are seeing here play out is two Santa Clauses to the max. Right? This back in the 1970s, Jude Wanniski said to Republicans, it was published in the Wall Street Journal, and Reagan picked it up, and this became the governing philosophy of the Reagan administration, and it has been of every Republican administration since then. When a Republican is in the White House, spend as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, run the debt up as far as possible. Reagan took the debt from $800 billion to $2.5 trillion. Run the debt up as much as you possibly can. And then when the Democrat comes into office, because it does go back and forth, it's just, that's inevitable. And when a Democrat comes into office, then you yell and scream about, oh my God, the national debt. And now it's just like, it's a little AP story going by, we're going to have $1 trillion debt this year. I mean, when Reagan came into office, the entire national, or deficit this year, that's the 1 year contribution to the debt, is the deficit. When Reagan came into office, the entire debt wasn't even $1 trillion. And now we've got Republican presidents generating $1 trillion debts every year. And proud of it. So in about 12 months, odds are fairly high, whether it's Bernie or Biden or Warren or Klobuchar or Steyer or Bloomberg or Buttigieg. Odds are pretty high in 12 months. One of those people is going to be our next president. I say the odds are a little better than 50-50. Although, there's like all these little weird variables like, the Russians are now hacking into Burisma. And so Bill Barr comes out and says, if the FBI is going to open an investigation into any presidential campaign for colluding with a foreign power, you can't do it unless I say you can. New rules. Right. So, you just never know what's going to happen. I mean, geez, anything could happen. Right. But get ready for this. Get ready for this. And remember this moment a year from now when Democrats are controlling the House and the Senate and the White House. And the media is wall to wall with screaming Republicans and think tank guys and pundits and reporters. The Chuck Todds of the world, the people who are making millions and millions of dollars and don't want to see their taxes going up, going, oh my God, how are we going to pay for how you want to have more food stamps? We can't. You know the story. We've all seen this, right? Unless you're in your early 20s, we have all seen this over and over and over again. I was serious about Bill Barr. This is pretty shocking. Attorney General Bill Barr is changing the rules on how the Department of Justice and the FBI can open investigations into possible foreign interference. You keep in mind it was the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who authorized looking in back in the day. This is under Obama, who authorized looking into the Russian involvement with the Trump campaign. And Barr is saying, nope, not going to do it. Barr said, one of the things that we agreed on is that the opening of a counterintelligence investigation of a presidential campaign would be something that the director of the FBI would have to sign off on and the Attorney General. No investigations unless they go through me. Right. This is interesting. Another crack in the media empire. We've talked several times over the last few weeks about all the heat, basically, no pun intended, because it has to do with global warming, all the heat that Murdoch's media empire is taking in Australia for perpetrating these two basic lies. The first being that the fire season this year is not the worst in history, and it's not, of course, you have fires in Australia. That's what happens, number one. And, actually, three lies. Number two, that those fires are being caused by arsonists. It's arsonists. It's got nothing to do with global warming. And number three, the reason why we're having trouble fighting these fires is not because they're just insanely worse than ever before because of global warming. No, we're having trouble fighting these fires because the Green Party, those greenies, they don't want us to set back fires and, that take up the fuel that prevents the fire from moving forward. Now, all three of those things are lies, but they are appearing in Murdoch-owned media, in the Australian, in the Sun, in the in all of these, and in Fox News here in the United States as well. These lies are continuing to be promoted. They're promoted by Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister, put into office with the help of Rupert Murdoch. And here's where it gets really interesting. Murdoch has two high-profile sons, Lachlan and James. I think they're from his first marriage. And James is married to Catherine, and Catherine is a big-time climate change person, worried about climate change, activist about climate change. And James is like, well, I'm just a business guy, my dad's a billionaire, and so I'm going to start an investment company. Seriously, he owns an investment company. It's called Lupa Systems. Private investment company in Australia. And Lachlan is here in the United States, and he's mostly running a bunch of stuff. I think he's running National Geographic, and he's running, I believe he's running parts of the News Corp that oversee Fox News. But he's more of a, manly man type. He likes to go big game hunting like Don Jr. So anyhow, James has now come out. This is the Daily Beast. Rupert Murdoch's younger son and his wife issued a rare public rebuke of the family's media empire and its promotion of climate change skeptics during Australia's bushfire crisis. In a long simmering rift between factions of the Murdoch family over climate change, Rupert's younger son, James, and his activist wife, Catherine, are attacking the climate denialism promoted by News Corporation, the global media group, and also by the Fox News channel, overseen by James's older brother, Lachlan. Fascinating. So, maybe there's some hope. As I was walking into work this morning, I was thinking, if you want to control a country, all you have to do is control its media. A lesson that Republicans figured out real early on, like in the 80s. And in fact, that had been pitched to Richard Nixon, you'll recall. But, Democrats don't seem to understand quite as much. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff here in the news. We've got the debates going on tonight. People in the chat room are discussing, or were earlier anyway, what's the best pot to smoke when you're watching a Democratic debate? Or is wine better? I don't know, We'll be back with your observations and more of the news of the day right after this. It's coming up on 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And this is the place where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person or Amazon? And we dare to say, no, not a chance. Come on. And welcome back. Oh, let's see here. Lydia in Port Angeles, Washington. Hey, Lydia, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Well, wow, that really is fascinating about Rupert Murdoch's kids.
Yeah.
I listen to Canadian radio, and I just heard for the first time this morning about Rupert Murdoch owning those TV stations or media outlets in Australia. But I didn't know anything about his kids, really. National Geographic?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, it's owned by News Corp.
That's what I was calling before. I've been on hold, and I'm glad you brought all that up, because it's exactly what I'm calling about. Is I'm a consumer of news, mostly free speech, TV, and saw this morning excerpt from Years of Living Dangerously, a guy named Tom Swetnam, who's a fire ecologist. He has something called the yearsproject.com. And then seeing actually on CBS News a clip on all the fires and how horrific. I mean, I was actually jolted to the point where I lost my breath when I saw this koala bear with singed hair and burnt paws trying to run in any direction, and everywhere was on fire. Mm. And the only comment after this whole show are, couple minutes of video footage from one of the panelists was, wow, it was so great to see those firefighters being welcomed so, graciously at the airport.
The American
Not one
firefighters.
comment how horrifying this is.
Yeah.
But the other aspect that I'm coming at it from is I'm a huge tennis fan. And the Australian Open opens up next week, and right now they're doing qualifying rounds.
Yep.
And I heard also on the news this morning that Eugenie Bouchard, a Canadian that played a qualifying round yesterday, had to have 4 or 5 medical timeouts during her match, which she did manage to finish and win. But she was complaining about how she felt like she was breathing in glass, like there were spikes in her.
Right, she was having trouble breathing. She couldn't stop coughing at one point. I saw it.
Yeah. So, at the same time, it's great these tennis players are donating money towards the relief, firefighting cause. if they can't play, there's going to be no money to donate. I mean,
Right.
and I just wonder also about the backing, the tennis channel. I've been watching it too much for 20 years, ever since Rafael Nadal came on the scene, who I think is an amazing person and athlete. But, where is the money behind this channel coming from? Who owns it? And are they doing anything other than these, personal donations from the individual players?
Right. I don't know the answer to any of those questions, Lydia.
I have a lot of questions now, and
I would think that, a good search engine would probably get you most of that information. DuckDuckGo.com works really well. I use it most of the time.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
You just type in, who owns the tennis channel. I'm guessing it'll pop right up.
Right. Okay. I'm both horrified and trying to be hopeful. You gave me a little encouragement the last time I called when the whole assassination thing had just happened, and you told me not to freak out.
Yeah.
So I'm still trying not to freak out. So thank you.
We can't be freaking out, Lydia. We've got to keep our wits about us because we are needed during this time.
Yes. Okay. Tag. I'm it. I'll see what I can do.
Thanks, Lydia. Great to hear from you. I appreciate it. It's 19 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Viagra for your brain. Just don't tell Limbaugh. He'll want some. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here. Nicholas in San Cristobal, Mexico. Hey, Nicholas, what's on your mind today?
How are you, Tom? A couple of things. Very quickly.
Your voice is quite muffled, Nicholas. I don't know if you can do anything about that, but it sounds like you have your thumb over the microphone or something, or if you're using earbuds, they're jammed into your face or something is not right.
Regular phone, sorry. Mexico,
Oh, okay. Just calling from Mexico. Okay, go for it.
Yeah. Just wanted to very quickly say that, I'm nodding as I do in the chat room on YouTube for you. It's becoming 2016 time all over again. It's my candidate or nobody. It's just happening all over. And these are some smart people, and I just would encourage them to all calm down at any rate. Your question early on was about whether Americans in general are afraid of becoming more like the European and Scandinavian countries. And I would say a resounding no. And we know that from all of the polls that are given when questions are asked. If you ask an American, do you want to become more socialist? Of course they're going to hear communist and run for the hills. But if you ask them, do you want more in terms of a universal health care system, something like, 78% of them say yes.
Yes. Right? Yeah, you're right. It depends on the survey, but they're all between 70 and 90%, yes.
Yeah, you're right, and greater gun control and freer access to education, on and down. So no, they're not afraid at all. In fact, over the decades, you and I are old enough to have seen it happening. The percentages of approval for the the commons, if you will, only increase. And a quick comment, if I have a minute, about Michelle Goldberg's article in the New York Times today. Did you read it?
You'll have to tell me the title of it.
She surprised me. I almost didn't bother to read it, although I admire her greatly, so I did read it, about how Elizabeth Warren is probably the person who can most
can bring us together. Yeah,
factions.
Yeah, I did read that, and I think she's right. Which is not to put down a Bernie at all, but I do think that Elizabeth Warren has the power and the ability. And Nicholas, at that point, I'm going to end this because I just got a text from my wife saying she can't understand your phone call, and she's listening at home. So, Nicholas, thanks a lot for the call. We got to figure out the phone thing there, or you need to figure out your phone thing. Mark in Las Vegas. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Hey, a couple of things. People might not be aware of this. You probably are. But you know what board James Murdoch is on?
I'm guessing he's probably on quite a few of them.
Yeah, but there's one that might surprise people. He's on the board of Tesla.
Oh, really? Huh. Interesting.
Yes. So it partially explains. I mean, he's being exposed to the reality of climate change by one of the smart guys on the planet.
Yeah.
So let's encourage that.
Elon Musk.
The reason the reason I originally called was there was a young lady who was kind of trashing some of the other candidates, including Pete Buttigieg and then Elizabeth Warren and so forth.
Yeah.
For her favorite guy, Bernie Sanders. And I want to caution people about spreading those stories. Let's get together. All right. We already have a right-wing propaganda machine. We don't need to extend their voice at this point. Let's all make our selections in the primary, but whoever comes out of that, just remember, show up and vote. If you sit out on the sidelines, it's a vote for Trump.
Right, and when you call in and vilify a candidate, you may well be hurting a person who's going to be this party's nominee, and that's not going to help any of us. Yeah, your point is well taken, Mark. Thank you. Aaron in Seattle. Hey, Aaron, what's up?
Hey, I had a short thought on this Warren-Sanders thing going on.
Yeah.
And the only way I could think Sanders would even say something like that would be in the context that a woman who ran a campaign or has policies like Clinton had cannot beat Trump and become president. That's the only way I could see that sort of statement coming out.
I would be very surprised if Bernie had said a woman can't beat Trump. I'd just be very, very surprised. We'll probably eventually find out. But I wouldn't be surprised if Bernie made some comment or anybody made some comment about how Donald Trump weaponizes everything from, and particularly gender. I mean, look at how he went after Megyn Kelly, for example. And that was interpreted as meaning a woman couldn't win. So, but I don't know. I'm going to wait for this to shake out. I think it's much ado about nothing. I think the differences, as both Warren and Sanders have pointed out in their responses to each other's camps, what unites us is much, much greater and much, much larger than what divides us. And let's get back to talking about the issues. And I'm with them on that. Rick in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Hey, Rick, thanks for listening to KTNF. What's on your mind?
I want to talk about Bill Doherty and people that are having what we call red-blue conversations.
Okay.
It's, on the internet as better angels. It's not a religious thing. It's an Abraham Lincoln quote, and it's about getting people of different opinions together and having depolarized talks.
So what kind of people do you think would want to go to have a conversation with somebody on the other side?
Well, because when we have these conversations, going through the steps that the training provides, people end up talking to each other in respectful ways, and then are able to share different opinions, and they actually end up wanting to get to know each other better through that process.
Have you experienced this, Rick, or are you telling me something that's being pitched?
We have had trainings at my church in Minneapolis. It's a progressive church.
Right.
And our goal, we had one of the trainings was with Bill Doherty, who is a co-founder of Better Angels, which was created right after the election.
Right.
And I'm experiencing that it provides us with the skills to talk with each other, not at each other.
So you've actually had conversations with Fox News watching, Trump loving, MAGA hat wearing people, and you've ended up closer to them?
Not yet. We've had some trainings, and we're looking.
Do you know anybody who has?
Yes. If you go to the Better Angels website,
do you know anybody who has?
No, not yet. We're having these trainings.
So
and
Rick,
the goal in April is to bring people together from a different.
I love the goal, Rick. I love the goal, and I'm familiar with the training and the program. Whether it's going to be effective, I mean, give me a call back if you use these tools and have an effective conversation with somebody who's wearing a MAGA hat. I mean, if you can pull that off,
that you would have
report back to us. Rick, I'm sorry, we're out of time. I got to run. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Iran just announced that they're arresting people who were responsible for shooting that airliner out of the sky. I think that on that list should be Donald Trump. Today's book in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Impeachment, A Citizen's Guide by Cass R. Sunstein. This is from Chapter 1, titled Majesty and Mystery. It's an old story, and it's probably even true. When the authors of the new American Constitution declared, after their months of work in Philadelphia, that they had finally reached consensus, one Mrs. Powell shouted a question to the revered Benjamin Franklin, then 81 years old. "Dr. Franklin, what have you given us, a monarchy or a republic?" He gave this answer: "A republic, if you can keep it." With those words, Franklin deflected the thrust of the question. True, he didn't refuse to answer a republic, he said, and not a monarchy. But in his view, the question wasn't what the framers, a band of good and great men, had given to the American people. The Constitution was not a gift. The question was what we, the people, would do with the framework that the framers had produced. The real agents, the most important actors in the nation's history were and are the you. You have a task, which is to keep it. And what you are to keep is a republic, which is what the American Revolution was fought to establish, and which is opposed to what the colonies fought against, a monarchy headed by a king who could not be removed from office and who could rule as a tyrant. From the Declaration of Independence, the history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. Just a few decades before he spoke, Franklin's words would have been unfathomably radical, but he captured the spirit of his age. Here's Alexander Hamilton writing in the very first of the Federalist Papers, which defended the American Constitution to a nation that was sharply divided on whether to ratify it. Hamilton sounded a lot like Franken, though much more grave. Quote, "It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country, by their conduct and example, to decide the important question, whether societies of men are really capable of, or not, of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. If there be any truth in that remark, the crisis at which we are arrived may with propriety be regarded as the era in which the decision is to be made, and a wrong election of the part we shall act may, in this view, deserve to be considered as the general misfortune of mankind." Franklin, Hamilton, and their colleagues thought a lot about impeachment. In their view, the power to impeach was central to the establishment of, quote, "good government from reflection and choice." Without the power to impeach, we the people would probably have refused to ratify the convention in the first place, the Constitution. Impeachment laid at the core of the founders' intricate and majestic efforts to balance the defining Republican commitments to liberty, equality, and self-rule with the belief in a strong, energetic national government. They achieved that balance with diverse features of the Constitution, including a 4-year term for the president, electoral control, the separation of powers, and a system of individual rights. It is ironic that impeachment, regarded in 1787 as an essential component of the balance, is now little understood by the people of this country. As Exhibit 1, consider the 1970 pronouncement by Gerald Ford, then a member of Congress and later President of the United States, that an impeachable offense, quote, "is whatever a majority of the House believes it to be at a given moment in history." As Exhibit 2, consider the 2017 claim by Nancy Pelosi, then the House Minority Leader and former Speaker of the House, that a president cannot be impeached unless he has broken the law. As you will see, both Ford and Pelosi got it fundamentally wrong. Their views make a mockery of the constitutional design. They are also anti-Republican, small r Republican. In American history, 3 presidents have been subject to serious impeachment proceedings: Andrew Johnson, Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton. During the impeachment process against Nixon, I was in my late teens. In a way, the controversy was inspiring. We the people were rising up against a president who had apparently done awful things. But I liked Nixon, and I didn't much like the Democrats, and I was torn. Riveted by the national debates, I wondered, are people trying to impeach Nixon because they hate him and his policies, or because he actually did something terribly wrong? Like many millions of Americans, I also wondered, what is impeachment all about anyway? The very word was unfamiliar and seemed like a kind of relic, something from a bygone age. The nation and Nixon himself received an unforgettable civics lesson back then in the 1970s, but I'm not sure we got a full answer to either question. When I decided to go to law school a few years later, I can't say that I was motivated by the Nixon proceedings, but they certainly helped to inspire my interest in our constitutional system. Like many others in my law school class, I was certain that some courses would be focused on the intriguing questions raised by Nixon's resignation. Above all, what were the framers doing with that impeachment provision? What are high crimes and misdemeanors? But no class spent as much as a single minute on impeachment. It was as if the whole topic was irrelevant, part of history's dustbin, a tiny footnote to the real issues in constitutional law. Sure, we talked about the power of the president, about when he could make war, about what he could do on his own. Impeachment by Cass Sunstein.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Over at Daily Kos, Marcos Melitsas is pointing out that in the latest civics poll, which has been tracking whether people want Trump impeached and removed from office or not, and has been tracking that since May of 2017, actually. And it's been about 50-50 all that time until Manafort was convicted, when it went up to 51-48. And then when Michael Cohen pled guilty, it was 51-48. And now it's at 52-46 nationwide. But where it gets really interesting is in the states. Now, because there's a bunch of state federal senators representing their states up for re-election. Arizona, it's Martha McSally, right? Is the Republican there? Yeah. Well, 50% of Arizonans think Trump should be impeached or removed from office. Only 48% say no. This might be a little problematic for Ms. McSally. In Colorado, Cory Gardner is the loyal Trump toady. Coloradans want Trump removed from office 55-42. I think whoever ends up running against Cory Gardner has a pretty damn good chance. In Iowa, it's 48-49. I don't know how that's going to affect Joni Ernst. In May, Susan Collins. 58% of Mainers think Trump should be removed from office by the Senate. 58%. Only 39% of Mainers think Trump should not be removed from office. Now, you have the exact opposite in Alabama, where Doug Jones is running for re-election. Unless the Kos says, unless Republicans renominate Roy Moore, Doug Jones is a goner. In Alabama, only 37% of Alabamans, if I'm saying that right, think that Trump should be removed from office. 61% say no, don't remove him from office. Gary Peters is up for re-election, Democrat in Michigan. Michiganders, 50% say remove Trump from office. 48% say don't. So it's getting fascinating. Anyhow, Joe in Newark, Delaware. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind today?
Tom, just full disclosure, I support Pete Buttigieg for president. But with that said, I will support a platypus if the Democrats nominate a platypus this year, because anything is better than that sleazy miscreant, Sleazy Donald.
Okay.
But one of the things that drives me crazy about the Sanders and the Warren campaign, you just repeated earlier today, was this whole concept that everybody wants universal health care. And that's true if you ask that question in that general sense. However, when you add the caveat to it, do you support universal health care if it means your taxes will rise? The numbers completely reverse. And even Sanders has admitted that on CBS this morning a few months ago.
Right, which is why Elizabeth Warren worked out a program where taxes would not go up on people who make under $150,000 a year, I think.
And we're not quite sure if that's going to wind up working or not.
Yeah.
The thing is, in America, Steve Schultz was 100% correct when he said, in the United States right now, a sociopath beats a socialist every time.
Yeah. Well, I doubt that. And I really do. I think that America is a lot smarter than you think, and that Steve Schmidt, who's a Republican, let's not forget, thinks, Joe, I'm not buying it. And I think that people are seeing through this. I mean, Donald Trump is tweeted out either yesterday afternoon or this morning that he saved people, saved their protection against pre-existing conditions, which of course is a lie, right? I mean, his Justice Department has gone to the Supreme Court and said, after the election, please strike down all of Obamacare and let, and the health insurance companies go back to kicking, 40% of us off our insurance policies if we get sick. But the fact that Donald Trump has to tell that lie tells me that people are over it. They're over it with being ripped off by their health insurance company. Joe, I don't know a single person. People may say, yes, I love my health insurance in as much as it pays my bills. But I've never heard a person say, oh, I love Aetna. Oh, I love United Healthcare. I love Blue Cross Blue. No, people just want the damn bill paid. These people are just banksters. So, it's going to take some campaigning. It's going to take some education. The one thing that I think probably is true is what Pete Buttigieg said, which is that there needs to be a transitional period for Americans to figure out how this works, because probably literally 90% of Americans have not paid enough attention to how single payer might work to have any clear understanding of it. And that transitional period would probably involve an opt-in. I think he's largely right about that. But that said, Elizabeth Warren has said, well, let's take 4 years to make the transition, and Bernie's now talking about a 3 or 4 year transition. So I think it's possible.
No, the thing is, this is wonderful, and this is what we're going to need if we're going to beat sleazy Donald this year. We have to have this kind of conversation. Yeah. And I really appreciate hearing from you and what you had to say, and you're 100% correct. But keep up the good work. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the call, and thanks for listening to us on Sirius XM. Ramona in California. Hey, Ramona, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's up?
Good morning, Tom, and thank you for educating us. You were talking about Fox News and how it gets into the minds of people. And I was watching Democracy Now! And Amy Goodman had 2 days of this documentary called The Great Hack. And it's on Netflix. And I don't have Netflix, but it impressed me so much I went over to my sister and watched it. Mm-hmm. And it shows how they get into, it's not just, Fox News, Cambridge Analytica, we know about that. But then Fox News took over that, and it's the biggest money-making organization, more than oil. And I just wanted, if people haven't watched it, it's really important that we watch it.
Yeah, Louise and I watched that a few months ago, and my recollection is it's really about big data, isn't it?
Yes, and how they collect your data. So I'm around younger people. I'm 72, and I'm around younger kids that are on that. That, I have a cousin that, what they say is just shocking, and there's no getting through to them. And it's through Facebook and how they change the minds of young people. So Fox News gets the older people, and
Facebook gets the younger ones. Yeah.
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 So I just wanted people to be aware of it. And what did you think of it?
I was educated by it. I thought it was definitely worth watching. And there were some very shocking moments, particularly the stuff about Cambridge Analytica, and how effective they were. And it didn't portray Facebook in a good light at all. But Zuckerberg and his libertarian buddies.
Zuckerberg went and had a private meeting with Trump.
I know, 2 of them. Yeah, I know. And he's inviting Republican senators out to California to his mansion for private dinners and things. Facebook needs to be broken up. Ramona, thank you for the call. Spot on. Bruce in Palmdale, California. Hey, Bruce, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how's it going? Well, I guess I'm tired of people saying a woman can't beat a man. Hillary Clinton got 2.8 million more votes than
Donald Trump
did.
Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, this is somebody, Hillary Clinton, 25 years of the media assaulting her, telling lies about her, Russian interference, and she still got 2.8 million more votes.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Than Trump.
I'm with you. There is no way that a woman can't become president of the United States, period. And look at, in the last election, 2018, look at how many women took office, both in the House and the Senate. I mean, it's just, and state legislators all over the country. Women are getting politically active, and women are winning campaigns. And and to the extent that gender becomes an issue, it generally works in their favor rather than against them. Thanks, Bruce. Spot on. Nathan in Omaha, Nebraska. Hey, Nathan, what's up?
Hi, Tom. For context first, I was born pretty much as Reagan was being sworn into office, about a month after that. Okay. You opened the show asking about the desperation of despair. How did you phrase it?
Oh, the diseases of despair we were talking about.
Disease of despair, yes.
Yeah. Alcohol.
Is that all on Trump, or is that 40 years of republicanism?
I'd say it's both.
My question.
I think it's both. It has been building and it has been growing, but the trend lines really sharply went down, bad. Things getting worse when Trump was sworn into office, and I think part of what's happened is that Trump, with his inaugural address, that Stephen Miller wrote about American carnage, he's making Americans more frightened. He's making Americans more neurotic. He's making Americans more worried, and in many cases with good reason. And it's not good for our national health, as it were, for our national mental health. And
I agree. I agree. But that began before that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the dismantling of the American middle class began on January 20th, 1981, when Ronald Reagan was sworn into office.
That's when I was born.
The day you were born. Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Nathan. Good talking to you. We'll be back. Boy, having your birthday be the day that America started being taken apart, that's got to be rough. It's 44 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Abby in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Hey, what's on your mind today?
Happy New Year to you. Hey, all this alleged, I want to put it in scare quotes, conflict or row between Bernie and Senator Warren, we have so many more important things to talk about. The media is ginning up this conflict because that's what they thrive on.
Well, that was my point this morning. I'm hearing most of this coming out of CNN, and CNN, of course, is sponsoring the debate tonight. So they're trying to get people to watch CNN, increase their ratings, increase their profits.
And they're going to try to gin up some sort of fight like they did last time they were on. And it's what the Russians want, and it's what the Republicans want, and it doesn't do us any good. In the interest of full disclosure, I should say that I'm a Bernie person. I was a Bernie delegate in 2016. And that said, I would be very happy if Senator Warren ended up being the nominee. And as supporters, we've got to really refrain from trashing each other. If Bernie's the nominee, we're going to need Senator Warren and her people, and even Biden's people and everybody else along with us in the general election. And the reverse of that is true. If it's Warren as the nominee, she's going to need all of us Bernie people behind her to push her across the finish line. So it's like all this conflict, and it's like, don't play along. Please don't play along, people. It's people that want this stuff to happen are not our friends.
Yeah, I'm with you, Abby. I completely agree. And I don't know where else to go with that, but other than just agree with you. Robin in Kingston, Washington. Hey, Robin, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to just talk about the process that's going on across America called civil information and inform you and the listeners that Michael Moore, back at the very end of December, Democracy Now! Really made a major flip in his political tactics and everything I talk to you comes from reality. I was on backstage in Manchester, New Hampshire in 2004 when Michael Moore was hosting a Jim Hightower event. This doesn't come out of nowhere. Anyways, I've been watching Michael Moore for an age, and Michael Moore has always had the concept, we have to put 1 million people and surround Washington, D.C., and then they'll learn. And that's his general perception. But back on, I believe it was December 24th, 2019 on Democracy Now!, I spent a nice hour with Amy, And he broke everything down into civil information, which is local into local, and you don't really need the Democratic Party. And I think that that's important. And I wanted to give you, I kind of invented the concept of civil informationing, and I wanted to just put a little bug in your mind what made me think of this in 2002. And that was we've been so stuck with the corporate and what I call oligarch media that I said, how can we get around that? And then I looked at the information systems that we used in our country over our history. And one of the things that really struck me and really made me come up with the concept of civil informationing was during westward expansion, the literacy, you can correct me on this, but I believe the literacy rate was unexpectedly high, and people sort of knew about the formation of the government and what was going is because as people moved west, they actually informed each other. They gave each other newspapers and articles to read and whatever. So that's where that came from. So that's what we're doing. That's what you're doing, and we need to do more of that.
Yeah, amen. And the overall literacy rate in the United States is, since the 1790s, has always been higher than most other countries. Robin, although it's not now. Robin, thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Ivan in Bartlett, Illinois. Hey, Ivan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thank you. I want to talk about, you were talking about strategy the other day.
Mm-hmm. Versus tactics, yeah.
Yeah. The Afghan war papers, which came out, 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yes, and the Washington Post, by the way, for people who don't know what we're talking about, this is right up there with the Pentagon Papers, the disaster of Vietnam that was revealed back in the day. But the Washington Post right now is recapping. They've kind of broken them down into categories, and they're running shorter articles breaking out all these pieces from the Afghan papers, and it's a really, really useful way to be able to dig into them. I encourage people to go check out the WashingtonPost.com website right now and look at these articles. Back to you, Ivan.
Exactly. After 19 years of war, 3,000 dead American troops, thousands more maimed and wounded, we have not and will not, just like the British and the Russians before us, ever defeat the Taliban.
Yeah.
And like you said, the generals had no strategy going in to win and have zero strategy on how to get out. Now, let me just point out how the racket of war works, or give you one example. We have thousands, I guess hundreds or thousands of contractors in Afghanistan, the likes of Halliburton and Blackwater, who are building roads, bridges, schools, and providing security for politicians. Now, these contractors are all paid with American taxpayer dollars. These contractors then use our taxpayer dollars to pay the Taliban not to attack them while they are doing their work.
Right.
Then the Taliban uses our taxpayer money to buy weapons and bombs to kill our troops.
Yep.
This is the racket of war, which Smedley Butler talked about. Now, let me just make one more point. If America, number one, if the news media had covered those Afghan papers half as much as they covered Ellen sucking up to George Bush in Dallas, Trump may have thought twice before he tried to start another stupid war in Iran.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Now, if we go to war in Iran, who are a lot better armed and have a lot more powerful army than
going to war with Iran is like trying to go to war with Germany.
Right. And if that war lasts 20 years, Tom, your children and grandchildren who are born today, thousands of them will die in that war.
Yeah. No, I agree. And Ivan, this is the Afghanistan papers, I think, are one of the most important things that have been published in quite some time. And it's all over the Washington Post, and it's really worth reading. And what you get is that George W. Bush lied us into the Afghanistan war just like he lied us into the Iraq war. That Afghanistan had offered to arrest Osama bin Laden and turn him over to a third country for trial if there was any evidence that he had anything to do with 9/11, and the evidence was apparently there. And George W. Bush said, no, we don't want you to arrest him. We're going to bomb your country instead. And we went after the second poorest country on earth. Burkina Faso was the poorest country on earth at that time in 2002, with a GDP of about $1 billion a year. The GDP of Afghanistan was $2 billion a year. I mean, we could have literally said to the Afghan people, we're going to double everybody's wealth if you guys will arrest Osama bin Laden and his little merry band. He had a couple thousand followers there. If you guys will arrest him and put him in a camp someplace or turn him over to us. And it would have cost us $2 billion. And instead we spent now $2 trillion. $2,000 billion. Now, Bush, knew that war was a good thing at first, politically. And in fact, it's what he told his biographer. Cindy Sheehan testifying before Congress, just laid it right out. Here it is, I think.
As a matter of fact, in interviews in 1999 with respected journalists and longtime Bush family friend Mickey Herskowitz, then Governor George Bush stated, "One of the keys to being seen as a great leader is to be seen as commander-in-chief. My father had all this political capital built up when he drove the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and he wasted it. If I have a chance to invade, if I had that much capital, I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to get everything passed that I want to get passed, and I'm going to have a successful presidency," end quote.
That was Cindy Sheehan, Gold Star mother. Her son Casey was killed in that war. That was Cindy Sheehan testifying, that was, Iraq. Cindy Sheehan testifying before John Conyers' committee in Congress. It's just amazing. Steve in Everett, Washington. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. I just have a question. Wouldn't it make sense if Republicans are using the Santa Claus theory to work in their favor? Shouldn't the Democrats bring it up in debate?
You mean, should Democrats be yelling about the deficit right now?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously, it's just rising and rising. And that, hey, maybe if we take an unprivatized health care, we could offset some of the tax breaks they're giving to all the millionaires.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing that the reason the Democrats aren't yelling louder about the deficit, and there are some who are, Michael Bennet, for example, the guy who's running for president, the quote, conservative Democrats are yelling about the deficit. But generally speaking, the whole deficit argument, it goes back to Pete Peterson and his buddies. Pete has passed away now, but he became a billionaire on Wall Street. And then he started this thing called the Peterson Institute, which keeps track every year of how much the debt is and how much of that debt is on you and your children, which is just a nonsense phrase, right? It's just nonsense. Nobody's ever been presented with a bill for the national debt. And in fact, the national debt was much higher than it is right now after World War II and after World War I. It just, you can resolve the national debt by stimulus programs, which actually involve a little more debt spending. And I think most Democrats understand this, but the Republicans push this, and they push it so hard because what they're trying to do is use the fear of the debt as an excuse to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, cut long-term unemployment insurance, cut Medicaid, cut education budgets, and say, we can't afford these things, right? This has been Grover, there's just been no shortage of Republicans, actually, who have, this has been their thing, right? They're running around going, I can't afford anything. And I think that most Democrats don't want to feed that. And that's why they haven't been giving it oxygen. But, good point. Thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Years of strategy and struggle against the prison industrial complex. It's a collection of essays. This one is by David Gilbert on page 31, titled "The System Within the System, the Prison Industrial Complex and Imperialism." For those of us held behind locked gates within the walls and fences topped with razor wire, the corrections regime is the system that works tirelessly to impose total control over every aspect of our lives. Yet as ponderous and powerful as prisons are, they're only one part, a central girder, of a much bigger and more foreboding house of horrors, which can most accurately be named imperialism. The structural needs of the larger edifice set the specifications for the size and position of the girder. The strength of the girder helps determine how long the building itself will stand. We can't understand the explosion of imprisonment in the United States since 1971 without looking at an imperialism's urgent needs and goals of that period. By the same token, we can't develop an effective program around the prison industrial complex without grappling with the stresses and trends of the larger system of imperial rule. To be clear, before you take time to read this chapter, I don't offer any brilliant ideas on strategy. Those will most likely emerge from the organizing and activist efforts themselves. However, some of the concerns discussed may raise questions that go into forming strategy. I definitely look forward to learning from the dialogues that this generates on these issues. Imperialism may sound like the kind of rhetoric we want to avoid, but it's one word that needs to be rescued as the best way to name the system that rules over us. The basis of imperialism is the relentless quest for profits around the globe. Its most striking characteristic is the colossal and grotesque polarization of wealth. That polarization happens between nations, between the rich countries of the North and the impoverished ones of the global South, the impoverished countries of Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia, and at the same time within each country based on class, race, and gender. The poles of dazzling wealth and abject poverty are intimately linked, as the former results from the ruthless plunder of the latter. This system is built on and intensifies all the major forms of oppression: patriarchy, capitalism, and white supremacy, all of which are structurally central. At the same time, imperialism highlights the global character of the system in a way that explains why the most intense oppression and resistance have been in the South, and that also provides the context for why the liberation struggles of the various people of color have been in the forefront within the U.S. There's no way to capture what the system costs in human life and potential, the pain and loss for all of us. Close to 1 billion human beings suffer chronic hunger, while another 2 billion face nutritional deficiencies. 1 billion lack access to clean drinking water. Just looking at children under the age of 5, imperialism is a holocaust in progress. Over 9 million die every year from easily preventable causes associated with poverty. The price for future generations may be even more severe as the rapaciousness of this global frenzy for profits threatens the very ecological basis for sustaining human life on any scale on our planet. Since most people won't accept living in squalor amid plenty, imperialism entails both the most sophisticated and the most brutal forms of social control. Its most salient feature is war after war after war, mainly against the peoples of the South. The domestic front line of such repression is a truly violent and harmful prison industrial complex. Today, 2,300,000 people are held behind bars, about 7 times the number in 1971. That explosion was unprecedented, coming after a 70-year period when the rates of imprisonment had remained more or less constant. This dramatic change did not result from some sudden skyrocketing of criminal activity, but rather from a radical expansion of what was designated as a crime and a draconian increase in the punishments for those crimes. Such extreme measures were driven by considerations way beyond criminal justice and often at cross purposes to the proclaimed goal of public safety. These destructive changes were born from crisis, one much more severe and protracted than the periodic ups and downs of the business cycles that occur over a roughly 10-year period, but rather a situation that threatened the very survival of the system. Such structural crises occur because capitalism is by its nature unstable. The economy is vast and complicated, but the major decisions are made by a tiny corporate and financial elite, with each thinking only of his own profits. When a structural crisis develops, the long-term institutional arrangements that assured a reliable flow of profits and the rule of capital no longer function. One dramatic example was the Great Depression of the 1930s, followed by World War II. At the end of that period, a new set of international institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, were created. At the same time, a new deal was hammered out for the terms of the bargain between capital and labor within the U.S. Those arrangements worked well for capital until they broke down a generation later. That new structural crisis, which emerged between 1968 and 73, is the seedbed for the burgeoning of the prison-industrial complex and many related changes in U.S. history. The first and most obvious signs were political, as the resistance to imperialism crested in 1968. Abolition now.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere. Rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering beyond the pleasant wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us. The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Ramesh Srinivasan. He's the author of a brilliant new book, Beyond the Valley, How Innovators Around the World Are Overcoming Inequality and Creating the Technologies of Tomorrow. He's a professor and director at the UC Digital Cultures Lab, the Department of Information Studies and Design, Media Arts at UCLA. RameshSrinivasan.org is his website, and you can tweet him at RAMESH Media, Ramesh Media, on Twitter. Ramesh, welcome to the program.
Oh, Tom, it's such an honor. And I also realized you've been reading a little bit from my book to your amazing audience. So I just want to say thank you, and I feel so supported.
Oh, you're welcome. We've it's in our rotation for our book reports. We do 6 minutes of book report at the top and bottom of the hour when our commercial stations are doing the news and things, for our feed. We're hearing reports now that, in fact, this came out last night, that Burisma, this company that Joe Biden's son worked for, has been or is in the process of being hacked or penetrated by the same Russian unit that apparently stole Hillary Clinton's campaign managers' emails and hacked the DNC. And it's like, we're about to see this all over again. On top of this, we're seeing the libertarians who run Facebook say, we don't care if Donald Trump has 1,400 different ads, but they all have lies in them that are, each one uniquely designed to micro-target a population of people who love cats or, love motorcycles or whatever it may be. That's no problem. It's, we're not... I'm starting to get this deja vu all over again about 2016, and I'm curious your thoughts on this as one of the leading experts on technology and the internet in the world. What do you think?
Yeah, there's no question, Tom. There's very little that has changed since 2016. Our public lives, our political lives, our sort of hopes and aspirations for a democracy rather than an oligarchic system of government, which is increasingly what we have in the United States, are increasingly resting on technology because we use technology, private corporate technology, to get the news, to communicate with one another, to receive insurance quotes, to basically do almost everything, right? To socialize, to communicate, and so on. So if those private technology platforms are driven by a logic of make money, get people's data, control people's attention, manipulate people's behavior at all costs, doesn't matter the effects on a democracy, doesn't matter the effects on all of our lives, doesn't even matter the effects on truth itself or actual journalism, we are in for a big problem. And this group that you're identifying, Tom, is the so-called the Internet Research Bureau. It's funny that it's called that, even though it is a basically army of hackers. They are experts at planting misinformation and figuring out mechanisms for it to go viral. I mean, keep in mind, Tom, with President Trump, from the start to the finish, we're talking about lies and misinformation that are directly aided and abetted by the way in which algorithmic technologies function, which privilege the inflammatory and the spectacular. And in many cases, for example, with President Trump, there are some estimates that about 60% of his followers on Twitter might just be bots. So we have no idea, we have no grounding in this digital ecosystem, and that is obviously anathema to peoples-based democracy, and I think I mentioned this to you in a previous communication, but, I work with, I'm a national surrogate as well for Senator Sanders, who I know is an old friend of yours.
Yeah.
So that's so cool.
Yeah, he, for 11 years on this program, every Friday, he took calls for a whole hour.
Amazing.
So this raises the question, what do we do about this? I wrote an op-ed a few weeks ago suggesting that Facebook, at the very least, should have to divest itself of all the various companies that it has acquired that represented potential competitors over the years. Instagram is probably the most well-known, but basically, if anybody represented a threat to them, they simply bought them out and either retired them or incorporated them into their product or created a new product line that they could control. That doesn't seem like it should happen. But that said, I also came of age in the United States during a time when it was illegal for the phone company to listen in on my conversations. They could not snoop on what I was saying and use that information, sell that information, market that information, or use that information to market things to me, for that matter. It was flat out verboten. Although I understand that now some of the VoIP phone providers have the ability actually to listen in on our conversations and create transcripts of them and look for keywords and all kinds of stuff. First of all, what's the status of that? But secondly, how did Facebook, how is it that we saw this problem with the phone company and we created this common carrier status way back in the 1920s and it held to largely to this day, but we never saw this with Facebook?
Great. The internet was publicly funded, right? There's a common pattern in this country that I think you have reported on for many years. Socialize the costs and privatize the profits, right? That's true with pharmaceuticals. That's true with the internet as well, which was publicly funded, turns 50 years old. First note of the internet started at UCLA. So in an earlier media era, we had a better ability to govern telecom monopolies in the making. I mean, for example, consider the antitrust law that was effective at breaking up AT&T that actually allowed AT&T to be actually competitive. AT&T was able to continue as a business, but it didn't come at the cost of everybody else. Now, what has happened has been a profound bait and switch when it comes to the internet, which is not simply a question or a concern about Facebook, but much more expansive, is that the internet has become the mechanism by which all our lives, all our activities, from phone to radio to television to news media to how we receive information, all of it is embedded in the internet. So it's a private corporate technologization of our lives that we are dependent on. So it's very difficult as human beings to realize that this immersive experience of having the internet be sort of encapsulated and encircling all of our lives all the time, it's very difficult for us to realize that that is similar or consistent with, questions of anti-surveillance and telecom, issues that dated back a few decades ago. We are catching up to the reality and recognizing the reality, which is good news, that our participation in the internet of today is a participation in a world of surveillance, extraction, and behavioral manipulation. It's participation in a digital ecosystem that manipulates our attention, gathers our data, employs almost nobody. When it has to employ people, it exploits them through the gig economy or call center work or content moderator work. Basically, we're participating in a system where winners take all, and those winners are, just a few execs.
So what do we do about this?
Yeah. Massive transformations are needed.
For example,
so there's a lot, Tom, we can do. And that's why Beyond the Valley, my new book is optimistic. It's actually optimistic. And here's some things we can do. First and foremost, every single member of a democracy, and I would say every single person in the world, deserves to have full disclosure about what is being collected about them. And that has to occur right now. For people who have never created, for example, a Facebook account ever, Facebook is gathering data on them. For people who have deactivated their Facebook accounts, their data is no longer their property. It is still part of Facebook's data. And this is not just true with Facebook. This is true with everybody. And remember, as you pointed out, that Facebook actually owns WhatsApp and Instagram and can gain those advantages, much like Amazon does, to have a disproportionate monopolistic influence. So disclosure is part one. Two, very, very important. We should have power over governing and shaping how Facebook and other tech companies function in our lives. You have reported on the numerous transgressions that Facebook has made, for example, in the country of Myanmar, in relation to our election. So every stakeholder that actually exists in the world, like journalists, like human rights folks, et cetera, that are affected by the private, hidden, corporate, and ignorant decisions of these tech companies, has to have power over shaping how those technologies are designed, and most importantly, auditing those systems. So, in Beyond the Valley, I describe predictive policing systems, for example, that it turns out are super racist. And I ask the question, if we are to have predictive policing systems, shouldn't Black Lives Matter be one of the designers of that system? Shouldn't the stakeholders actually have power over the tech corporation itself and how it functions? So we need disclosure, auditing, and collaborative forms of governance. And then I would say the last major component, there's quite a bit here, and I'm publishing a piece in The Guardian, Tom, that will come out probably in the next 2 weeks, called Why We Need a Digital Bill of Rights. Mm-hmm. But the third major point is the incredible economic inequalities, and I would say political as well, and injustices that are part of this private corporate technologization of our world. We know the numbers. Bernie says them all the time. 3 people with equivalent wealth to 50% of the population, 8 people in the world with equivalent wealth to nearly 4 billion people. This is not created by the internet or technology, but technology is amplifying these dynamics. So every person whose lives are economically precarious, thanks to the gig economy or the onset of automation, we need to ensure that all of those people have dignified, just work with living wages. We can't buy into the bait and switches of just simply buying into universal basic income at the cost of a living wage or at the cost of meaningful employment, at the cost of unionization. So we need to protect workers rather than fetishize about the future of work, which is what a lot of technocrats keep discussing again and again. We need an internet that works for the 99%, not an internet that is manipulative and extractive and built upon the model of absolute exploitation of people. And keep in mind, the internet is material. It's not just about our communications. The internet is associated with labor practices, for example, Chinese workers being exploited while they're assembling our iPhones, minerals being pulled out of the ground from the Congo. And I actually visited a couple Chinese-owned mines, and I got kicked out of them in Uganda and the Congo, writing this book right on the border. People are pulling out coltan minerals. Think about Bolivia and Evo Morales with lithium, which is in every single device. We might think about our experiences digitally as immaterial, as simply about communication, but they're actually about extracting and exploiting.
Yeah.
And so we need to fight for workers' rights and environmental justice as well.
Amen. Ramesh Srinivasan, the book is Beyond the Valley. Ramesh, thanks so much for dropping by today. It's great talking with you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for all your support, Tom. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Good talking with you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Stick around. It's 18 minutes past. And welcome back. Doug in Great Falls, Montana. Hey, Doug, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I was just going to sort of say amen to Amish and your previous caller, that I would like to hopefully express this a little bit better than they did. Basically, what happened with these Amy Goodman reports last week is we were subjected to the biggest news story of a really big news week, because the underlying problem that prevents the public from reasonably addressing all issues is this technology. A lot of the technology is incentivized by widely dividing people. Mm-hmm. So we're stuck in a polarization for profit world, and until that fix is fixed, we're going to get nowhere. All these things you talk about, Tom, we're going to get that because we can't figure out what's going on. Now, immediate congressional hearings is what they recommended, because we need to get this. We're going to have an Iowa election in a couple of weeks, and so people really need to know and can somehow, without the help of lawmakers or legislation, do something about this election. Because I guarantee you, man, from what I heard in that series of reports, it's going to get so much worse this year. There are now hundreds of companies like Cambridge Analytica. Facebook is a crime scene. They're hiding all the information on how Trump was elected. And what they described in the reports last week is that they specifically targeted neurotics, a big category in the world.
Yeah.
They targeted neurotics in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan, and that's how our questionable president
and cranked him up. Yeah, they cranked him up. You found the lever to freak people out. You find people who are already semi-freaked out, and you find the lever that double freaks them out, and you totally freak them out. And I'm with you.
Yeah, they're doing that now on city commissions. They're doing it on state reps. It's going to be like falling off a log, because DJT and McConnell McGrim, they're all going to get reelected. We're going to see fascists in our state governments, and I am just so worried. I've been studying and teaching about this in college here in Great Falls for almost 10 years, teaching persuasion, ethics, media manipulation. Mind-bending movies is the way the class started out, because I noticed an epidemic of mental maladies with the students today. Close to half the students cannot navigate the modern world. They're surrounded by screens. Nobody in this country has been taught film history.
Right. So Doug, given how essentially psychopathic, conscience-free and skillful these guys are on the right, how should the left respond?
We got to get congressional hearings, because we have the public house. We have the people's house. We need congressional hearings to start as soon as this impeachment thing is done, and just interview these people. Amy had Brittany Kaiser, who's the whistleblower from Cambridge, on her show. She had the two filmmakers who now have discovered much more than when they made the movie The Great Hack.
Right.
That was put together over a year ago. So so much more has happened. And even someone like me who's been studying and teaching about this for years was absolutely shocked at what I learned last week. And I've been trying to get even local indivisible groups and other people to even listen to any of this, because we can't solve any of our other problems until we can talk reasonably together.
Yeah, excellent points, Doug. Thank you very much for the call. I'll have to look for those Democracy Now! Segments. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, 23 minutes past the hour. Vogel in Seattle. Hey, Vogel, what's on your mind today?
Hey, can you hear me? Is this clear?
I hear you just fine, Vogel.
Okay. Hey, Tom. Thank you. I'm a first-time caller for sure, and I want to preface I have a unique perspective because I'm like 5 years into a quadriplegic injury and a traumatic brain injury. And the radio station, the other one that I contribute to out of my SSI, which I was kind of screwed out of my SSDI. But either way, they quit their show of local news after 27 years because they went international and it wasn't important for people to know Seattle local news on the internet. And that's the angle that I have bulleted a couple points, and I'll try to keep it together. That basically, I found your station because I had to find something new to do on Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings. And I believe that the young are going to fix this if we can hold on and save the planet before them, because they are going to outnumber the old and new races just by numbers like baby boomer style.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
And I stopped watching news about 2 years ago. I only did watch it because I like to listen to our head of the country freaking talk stupid. And I quit listening like a year and a half ago, but now I came onto your show, and I like that you have all the callers' opinions, which is more engaging in the first place than listening to the rhythm of the media. And that the new way of communicating and the education and educated children are going to outnumber all of this, right?
I hope so, Vogel. I know that there is a huge effort underway right now. The Young Republicans are spreading out across the schools. They have an enormous amount of money. It's literally, the organization is called the Young Republicans, and there's another organization called Young Americans for Freedom, YAF. They have big money, I think, from the Kochs. I could be wrong. They are, they're trying to establish strong footholds in our schools. And then you've got the just nakedly racist groups that show up here in Portland to do battle with pretty much anyone who wants to challenge them. And they're reaching out to young people, and they're doing it quite successfully on the internet in a lot of ways, on everything from YouTube to neo-Nazi websites. But broadly, I'm very optimistic. I think you're absolutely right that young people, there's a lot more young people who are waking up than there are young people who are falling under the spell of these guys.
Yeah, and I think that with the generation basically getting old and dying off, and even with the new recruits, they're going to be outnumbered just because of information. Yeah. And once again, how I found your show was because my local news went, international, if you will.
Went poof.
And then I found you, and so I just wanted to point out that I think that, and no one that I know is probably going to hear me talking on the radio right now, which is a bummer, but it just the way that it's changing, I think that the new way of recruiting, both directions, if you will, is going to be left up to the educated young.
Yeah, I from your lips to God's ears, Vogel. I certainly hope so. Vogel, thank you very much for the call, and thanks for listening to KBCS there in Seattle. I really appreciate it. We'll be right back. It's 27 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, coming up on 28 past, as we continue with more of the news of the day and your calls through our program. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So do you think that Mike Lee and Tim Kaine, talk about the odd couple, are actually going to bring people together to stop Trump on war powers? Years of strategy and struggle against the prison industrial complex. It's a collection of essays. This one is by David Gilbert on page 31, titled "The System Within the System, the Prison Industrial Complex and Imperialism." For those of us held behind locked gates within the walls and fences topped with razor wire, the corrections regime is the system that works tirelessly to impose total control over every aspect of our lives. Yet as ponderous and powerful as prisons are, they're only one part, a central girder, of a much bigger and more foreboding house of horrors, which can most accurately be named imperialism. The structural needs of the larger edifice set the specifications for the size and position of the girder. The strength of the girder helps determine how long the building itself will stand. We can't understand the explosion of imprisonment in the United States since 1971 without looking at an imperialism's urgent needs and goals of that period. By the same token, we can't develop an effective program around the prison industrial complex without grappling with the stresses and trends of the larger system of imperial rule. To be clear, before you take time to read this chapter, I don't offer any brilliant ideas on strategy. Those will most likely emerge from the organizing and activist efforts themselves. However, some of the concerns discussed may raise questions that go into forming strategy. I definitely look forward to learning from the dialogues that this generates on these issues. Imperialism may sound like the kind of rhetoric we want to avoid, but it's one word that needs to be rescued as the best way to name the system that rules over us. The basis of imperialism is the relentless quest for profits around the globe. Its most striking characteristic is the colossal and grotesque polarization of wealth. That polarization happens between nations, between the rich countries of the North and the impoverished ones of the global South, the impoverished countries of Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia, and at the same time within each country based on class, race, and gender. The poles of dazzling wealth and abject poverty are intimately linked, as the former results from the ruthless plunder of the latter. This system is built on and intensifies all the major forms of oppression: patriarchy, capitalism, and white supremacy, all of which are structurally central. At the same time, imperialism highlights the global character of the system in a way that explains why the most intense oppression and resistance have been in the South, and that also provides the context for why the liberation struggles of the various people of color have been in the forefront within the U.S. There's no way to capture what the system costs in human life and potential, the pain and loss for all of us. Close to 1 billion human beings suffer chronic hunger, while another 2 billion face nutritional deficiencies. 1 billion lack access to clean drinking water. Just looking at children under the age of 5, imperialism is a holocaust in progress. Over 9 million die every year from easily preventable causes associated with poverty. The price for future generations may be even more severe as the rapaciousness of this global frenzy for profits threatens the very ecological basis for sustaining human life on any scale on our planet. Since most people won't accept living in squalor amid plenty, imperialism entails both the most sophisticated and the most brutal forms of social control. Its most salient feature is war after war after war, mainly against the peoples of the South. The domestic front line of such repression is a truly violent and harmful prison industrial complex. Today, 2,300,000 people are held behind bars, about 7 times the number in 1971. That explosion was unprecedented, coming after a 70-year period when the rates of imprisonment had remained more or less constant. This dramatic change did not result from some sudden skyrocketing of criminal activity, but rather from a radical expansion of what was designated as a crime and a draconian increase in the punishments for those crimes. Such extreme measures were driven by considerations way beyond criminal justice and often at cross purposes to the proclaimed goal of public safety. These destructive changes were born from crisis, one much more severe and protracted than the periodic ups and downs of the business cycles that occur over a roughly 10-year period, but rather a situation that threatened the very survival of the system. Such structural crises occur because capitalism is by its nature unstable. The economy is vast and complicated, but the major decisions are made by a tiny corporate and financial elite, with each thinking only of his own profits. When a structural crisis develops, the long-term institutional arrangements that assured reliable flow of profits and the rule of capital no longer function. One dramatic example was the Great Depression of the 1930s, followed by World War II. At the end of that period, a new set of international institutions, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, were created. At the same time, a new deal was hammered out for the terms of the bargain between capital and labor within the U.S. Those arrangements worked well for capital until they broke down a generation later. That new structural crisis, which emerged between 1968 and 73, is the seedbed for the burgeoning of the prison-industrial complex and many related changes in U.S. history. The first and most obvious signs were political, as the resistance to imperialism crested in 1968. Abolition now. Thom Hartmann here. My new book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, has arrived. What if the Supreme Court did not have the power to strike down laws? Discover the hidden history of judicial review and this scam called original intent. Learn how we can save the planet by modernizing the Supreme Court. And most important, how we can democratize the Supreme Court now before it's too late. From the time Americans wake up until the time we go to bed, everything we do, touch, ingest, breathe, and use has been touched by the Supreme Court. In this book, I lay out the history of the Supreme Court from Alexander Hamilton until how the court overstepped its constitutional powers. America does not belong to the kings and queens of the court. It belongs to the people. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America is available now in fine bookstores everywhere.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Elizabeth Warren is saying something that I think is absolutely fascinating. She's said this in the past, but it just got real for me. There was a piece of it that I didn't understand, and I'm assuming that this is not new. Marissa Higgins is writing about it over at Daily Kos right now. But I think that Elizabeth Warren's been saying this for some time, but I didn't get it. What she's saying is that on day one of her presidency, she will cancel student loan debt and she won't need Congress to do it. According to Elizabeth Warren, and there's one smart lady, according to Elizabeth Warren, under a law called the Higher Education Act, the Secretary of Education has the power to modify student loans, to wipe them out, to raise the interest rates, to lower the interest rates, to make them go away, whatever. And it's kind of a loophole in the law, and she fully intends to step into that loophole. She said, I'll direct the Secretary of Education, this is on day one, to use their authority to begin to compromise and modify federal student loans consistent with my plan to cancel up to $50,000 in debt for 95% of student loan borrowers, about 42 million people. I think, up to this point, when she and Bernie have said, no more student debt, people have thought, yeah, right, how are you going to do that? Well, apparently, it's right there in the law. It can be done. Of course, don't hold your breath waiting for Betsy DeVos to do it, but sure enough, it's right there and it can be done. Sean in North Platte, Nebraska. Hey, Sean, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing today?
Good. What's up?
Hey, I was watching the Young Turks last night, and they played a clip of Bernie saying back in 1987 he was interviewing a class full of third graders saying women can run, women can serve in office. This was back in 1987.
Right.
And I think they're just going after Bernie because I think they want Elizabeth Warren and Bernie to go at each other because they were scared they could see Bernie in the lead, and I think that scared CNN, and they didn't like that, in my opinion. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't disagree with your analysis. I think probably the larger point is that when you add together Bernie's supporters and Elizabeth Warren's supporters, between the two of them, they have almost 40% of the entire marketplace of Democratic supporters, and it's fairly solid. I mean, these are people who are not going to easily be moved to another candidate, and whereas the people who are supporters of the other candidates, outside of some very unique special interest circumstances, could be moved to Bernie or Elizabeth Warren. And so I think that, CNN is concerned. I think all the powers that be are concerned. But on top of that, I mean, let's just keep in mind, CNN, the only way that they make money is by selling advertising and having lots and lots of people watch the programming on which those ads appear.
May I say something else?
And but let me finish this. I think that they have an incentive to promote this conflict because people will tune in tonight. People slow down for fistfights and car wrecks. People will tune in tonight hoping to see a fight, or at least that's what CNN is trying to create. Back to you, Sean.
Yeah, see, I think honestly, CNN would rather see Trump back in there than somebody like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. I think they'd rather see, because they're all about money, in my opinion.
I doubt that. I think that I would like to think that the programming manager. Now, keep in mind, CNN is owned by AT&T, which is a very conservative corporation that is in the spy business big time and all kinds of other stuff. But nonetheless, the programmers at CNN, they know what Les Moonves told us all, the head of CBS, Bernie, keep it up. It may be terrible for America, but it's great for CBS. We're making money hand over fist. I think that the programmers at CNN have to be thinking, if we get another kind of, moderate, reasonable, thoughtful, but not rock the boat president, kind of like a Barack Obama, there's going to be nothing to cover. There's not, people aren't going to be turning the TV on every day going, oh, what happened now? But if it's a genuine progressive like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, they're going to shake stuff up. They're gonna really rattle some cages in Washington, D.C. They're going to make things happen, and that might be very good for business. At least I hope that they're listening, and I hope that they're thinking that way. So, Sean, could be. Thank you very much for the call. Jim in Tower, Minnesota. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Hi, Tom. See, I want to point out something I saw on TV a couple Saturdays ago. There was the last college football game, was the Army-Navy game. Mm-hmm. And during the game, about a dozen of the students got in front of the television camera way up at the top of the stands, and they gave the salute that Trump always gives when he's talking outside over his helicopter. If you put your thumb to your forefinger and stand the other three fingers up in the air.
Right, the OK sign. It's also the white power sign, yeah, I know.
It's the white power sign. And I found that out from those kids at the Army-Navy game that were heavily disciplined for doing that on national TV.
And not just Trump. I mean, go back and look at the footage of the Kavanaugh hearings. This woman who was working with Kavanaugh sitting right behind him, and she was aggressively trolling people with the OK sign. Yeah, it's pretty pathetic, Jim. It really and truly is. Thanks for the call. Kent in Amstead, North Carolina. Hey, Kent, what's up?
Hey, I had a couple of comments, Tom. I started watching the Michael Moore Where Should We Invade Next movie.
Isn't that a great movie?
I got as far as France, and I started thinking about what may take place in the Senate in the next couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And it made me think that the future and fate of this young democracy may be riding on what John Roberts does or doesn't do as the presiding Supreme Court justice in that place. And apparently, if the Democrats request it, he can invoke a oath of fidelity to make sure that the senators that take the oath that they'll be impartial and listen to the evidence and witnesses, that if they will not either take that oath or have already violated that oath, i.e. Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell, Moscow Mitch, that they can be dismissed. And if he rules that for the senators that have already dug their heels in with the verdict of acquitted and not removed, they cannot override his decision to dismiss jurors, just like any other trial in America, where a unfit juror is dismissed for a prejudicial outlook. And the question is, apparently, the Democrats have to request this of, when they do the rules.
They may try, Kent, but I can't imagine that John Roberts would do that. This guy is a partisan Republican. John Roberts got to where he was, in part, he used to work in the Reagan administration. There's a whole chapter about him in my book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. He used to work in the Reagan administration, and then in 2000, when the Bush campaign sued Al Gore, the Gore campaign, and sued the United States government in the Bush v. Gore case, saying that if the vote in Florida wasn't immediately stopped, it would, quote, cause irreparable harm to plaintiff George W. Bush, end quote. John Roberts went down to Florida to help teach the guys who were going to be arguing before Chief Justice Rehnquist, how best to get on his good side, because Roberts used to clerk for him. And that's why George W. Bush made John Roberts Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, since then, John Roberts is now trying to be an institutionalist and try to be all, official and formal and stuffy and thoughtful. But at the end of the day, the guy is a Republican. And anybody who, and particularly anybody who was that deep in bed with the Reagan administration, I just have no faith in at all. But we'll see, Kent. No doubt the Democrats will bring it up. We'll see. Thanks a lot for the call. Carl in Columbus, Ohio, listening on WGRN. Hey, Carl, what's up?
Yeah, good afternoon, Tom.
Hey.
On the subject of voter suppression, I'd like to let your audience know that here in Columbus, Ohio, back in 2004, I think it was, we had something called the Mighty Texas Strike Force. And they were involved in using payphones in a hotel downtown Columbus to intimidate people who perhaps have prison backgrounds and so forth.
You mean they were calling people who were registered vote? Apparently in Ohio, you can still vote if you're a felon as long as you've served your time, right?
I believe that's correct.
So they were calling up felons and basically saying, we know you're a felon and you really shouldn't go vote, that kind of thing?
They were finding individuals from their databases who had some kind of legal problems and suggesting that, or immigration problems.
Yeah, this is well, if they have an immigration problem, they're not a citizen, so they couldn't vote anyway. But this is the kind of stuff Republicans do. And I was just speaking of the Supreme Court Chief Justices, Rehnquist, who I just mentioned, got to where he was back in the 1960s in Arizona. He lived in Phoenix. And he was a big bear of a guy. He was like 6'3". He's huge. And Rehnquist got where he was in the 60s with a program called Operation Eagle Eye. And Operation Eagle Eye was a bunch of Republicans who would show up at voting places, polling stations on Election Day in Hispanic or Native American communities, and in some cases African American communities as well. But Rehnquist himself specialized in Hispanic and Native American, and he would demand to see proof from the voters that they were actually eligible to vote. And what this did is it radically slowed down the line. Number one, and number two, it it scared, it intimidated a lot of voters, and so they would leave the line, or they would simply never come back and vote again. And
here in 2004, we had booth slowdowns, polling place slowdowns,
right?
And I think they closed at 7 o'clock at night, and except that they would continue until they finished the line.
Right.
We had a line probably 50 to 100 feet out the door, and you frequently close with democracy is not a spectator sport.
Mm-hmm.
Myself and a friend went. It was raining. There was more than 50 feet of people out the back door. Mm-hmm. We went down to the convenience store and bought plastic sheeting, jugs of water, pop, and
good on
so
you.
forth. So we gave these people
stay
an
in line and
overhead
vote. Yeah.
Yeah, and a couple other points I'd like to make. I'm going to ask you for a reprise of something I heard you brilliantly deliver back about 2007.
Carl, it's going to have to wait to a future call because I see that I'm going to hit a break here in about a second and a half.
Can you hold me over?
I can't. But okay. Call back again and we'll continue the conversation. Carl, thank you for the call. It's 48 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back in just a moment with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Emily in Bullhead City, Arizona. Speaking of Arizona, hey, Emily, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
I wonder why no one has asked why after Iraq gave all these warnings about what they were going to do, this tit for tat, they were going to shoot off all these rockets or whatever, why would someone deliberately send an airliner into harm's way?
I think it was poor judgment.
No, I think it was deliberate.
Well, that Ukrainian International Airlines plane that got shot down was the fourth or fifth plane that had taken off from that airport during that period of time.
Yeah, but why would they even think about sending? They're going to be shooting off all this.
Right. There should not have been commercial aviation in the area. I agree with you.
Yes, they gave them warning after warning. Everybody. So why do you think Iran was so?
I think Iran thought that they could accomplish two things. They could have their military shoot some missiles into Iraq at the same time that they could continue normal operations of their very busy commercial airport. And it turns out not so much. But they thought they could pull it off.
I think that somebody deliberately sent it in there to get shot down. It makes a big.
I would be very surprised.
I think you better think about. Well, why would you deliberately send something in harm's way when they were told that they were going to be shooting off all these missiles?
I don't believe that they thought they were sending these planes into harm's way. The air traffic control system is detailed and sophisticated and heavily regulated. And frankly, from the arrests that we're hearing that have happened in Iran now, it seems that there was these guys on the ground who had surface-to-air missiles who had been. There was one suggestion, actually, that an American radio commentator was saying, or television commentator was saying, look out, B-52s are coming, but whatever. Somebody on the ground got trigger happy, and they saw this jet, and they thought it was an American bomber, and they took it out. And I'm content to believe that that's the beginning and end of the story. Tom in Joshua Tree, California. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I was calling regarding the renewable energy concepts that might be discussed tonight and addressing the Green New Deal, should that be part of the subject matter. And I live in the California desert. We've been a target area for renewable energy. And with the idea that some people might think the California desert's going to solve the world's problems for renewable energy as we get into this Green New Deal. And I wonder if the candidates really understand the metric that is going to be involved. In other words, currently there's 33 energy providers in California, and a couple of them are big corporations. They own tons of transmission lines, and I think they're big lobbyists. So they're probably going to be pushing their agenda for how they're going to introduce the solutions to our carbon footprint.
Of course.
Unfortunately, I don't know that it's really a workable plan. You know, if you look at the Ivanpah billion-dollar facility that was failed, I wonder if they understand how industrial solar meets the distributed solar concepts.
I'm not sure, Tom. I've seen the stuff that said that, just the Mojave Desert captures enough sunlight to power the entire country. But how do you distribute that is a whole other different question. But we'll see. We'll see tonight. Tom, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. John in Kansas City, Missouri. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Oh, well, hold on. Let me get you on speaker.
In that case, let me put you on hold there, John, and we'll pick you up in a little bit. Jeff in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Great show as usual. Sticking with the theme of today's show, the ineptness of the corporate media, I wanted to extend that to the subject of impeachment. For instance, instead of badgering Pelosi incessantly for the last 3 weeks, why wasn't the corporate media going after McConnell and Lindsey Graham?
I know. I ranted about this at length the day before yesterday. Because I listened to Chuck Todd's show and he spent the whole hour going, the Democrats are really getting nervous and Pelosi's really in a corner and I'm like, well, wait a minute. I completely agree with you, Jeff. Thank you, Sheila in Talent, Oregon. Hey, Sheila, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, nothing until that woman was on a little while ago. None of us sitting at home in any of these countries, my country included, knew that Iran was going to shoot off ballistic missiles. They were thinking more like Katyusha rockets. They also thought car bomb, truck bomb, suicide bomb. Nobody knew. We sat on pins and needles thinking it wouldn't even happen that soon, that it was going to be down the road. Sure. But news people even commented on that. So nobody knew. When that plane took off, she took off from Iran to get out of Iran.
Right.
And there was a grounding. I remember I never left the airways listening when this happened because I was terrified. I've got a nephew over there and serving in uniform. A very brown nephew, everybody. So it just irks me what he's taken in this country, the verbiage he's taken from racists. And my nephew, my beautiful nephew, is over there risking his life. So at any rate, we did not know. That plane went off the radar at 8,000 feet, so it was already in the air for a bit. And we also have to remember that it was Sean Hannity on the airways before those missiles left their mobile units, that he warned Iran that B-2 bombers were on their way, that the greatest military in the world, that there was a day of reckoning. I can't remember all the
Yeah, I saw the clip. I saw that Seth Abramson had tweeted about that. I don't know that Iran is monitoring Sean Hannity, and I think I'm inclined to think that this is just good old-fashioned screw up. Say what?
I think it was a screw up, but one has to remember that they do monitor. Russia probably monitors Fox because Trump takes a lot of his advice from them. He does a lot of things by what they say to him. I just realized I'm on speakerphone. I am so sorry. But so I think they do. Did they think that was I looked at the area mass of a B-2 bomber versus 737. I even thought when this first happened, the 737 was a mechanical error because we've seen a lot of this already, but it was an 800, not a MAX. So I think it was a legitimate, terrible, horrible, brutal mistake. And the biggest problem Iran has is they should have owned up to it in the beginning.
Right, from the get-go.
And,
although I'm not sure that they knew. I mean, they might have been thinking that it was some local militia that took it out or whatever. In any case, thank you for the call, and thank you all for being with us today. Wow, that show flew by. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, same channel. Let your friends know about Progressive Media, by the way. However you're listening or watching this program, listening to or watching this program, tell your friends, your neighbors, your relatives. Talk about it on social media. And not just this program. There's a lot of great progressive programming. In all probability, where you find this show. Tell people about it. Get out there, get active, tag You're It. And tomorrow we'll discuss, what happened in the debates tonight. I'm looking forward to it. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.